Hey, don't skip. Give me your 15 seconds.
No.
I've launched my official Patreon, and you will find exclusive 18+ stories there. But why not here?
I don't know.
Because of community guidelines. But there are many stuffs that I want to share with you all regarding Harry Potter, Naruto, and Deku that I can't share here. Please join our Patreon to find spicy, 18+ and unique story. Now enjoy.
Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if Harry Potter was trained by Minerva FPR, Triwizard? Part 2. Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story for granting us permission to use it in our YouTube video. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. The author's creation and the original stories link in the descriptions. Please do check that first. Now enjoy the video. The next morning, training started in earnest. For the first hour, all of them, trainees and trainers, were worked hard physically as they went through the exercises Harry, Amelia, and Minerva had designed for them. The goal was to increase their endurance, strength, speed, reflexes, and ability to dodge. Trainees and trainers alike disliked them for the difficult exercises, but none complained since they realized it was all for their own good. The second hour consisted of magic practice, where the trainees worked hard on the areas that they struggled with, such as accuracy, power, and control. The trainers also taught them advanced defensive and offensive magic, worked on silent casting, and practiced dueling. They had them split up into different pairs each day, with Harry participating to make it even. This was to help them learn how to adjust to different dueling styles. It also helped them to learn each other's as well, so that they could fight together well. For the last hour, they worked on occlumency with Andromeda. She began teaching them how to build and maintain their mental defenses, as well as how to store their memories, thoughts, and emotions. For the first day, she talked to them each individually to help them discover the method that best fit them. Samina joined them the morning before she left and gave all the trainees, except for the natural animagi, books on their abilities to help them learn how to control and use them. Ginny and Neville's elemental abilities were confirmed by Minerva, who gave them the same exercises to practice on their own that she had assigned. Harry, Ron, Fred, and George had been informed that they would wait until school started to complete their Animagus transformation, since it would be easier to hide it there. The three wizards were a bit disappointed, but understood the reasoning behind it. This training schedule continued for the rest of the week. They met every single day, including the weekends when they trained for an extra hour. By the end of the first week, during the rest of the day, the trainees spent as much time studying and practicing as they could without getting caught. Those living in Black Manor did a variety of things. Charlie, Fleur, Amelia, Andromeda, Tonks, and Hestia went to work during the day, with the latter two alternating days for going into the office or staying to guard Harry. When they weren't working, Amelia and Andromeda began to prepare for the Wizengamot session that was to happen on August 5th. Throughout the week, they cautiously reached out to some of their contacts, mentioning a possible new faction entering the fray and asking them to keep an open mind. They also taught Harry about what to expect during the session and started working on what he would say during it. Meanwhile, Minerva kept Harry busy with training and studying during the day, including apparition practice. Harry was quickly learning how to control his two elements, something that Minerva was very proud of, but he still had a lot of work before he could claim to be proficient with them. He also had almost mastered apparition by the end of the week, and Minerva planned to bring him to the ministry to take his test on Monday of the next week. As for his Newt studies, Minerva was sure that he would be well prepared to take the test, which Amelia had scheduled for August 12th. Susan joined them during their training and study sessions as well. Minerva and Harry, not wanting her to feel left out, made sure to work with her on her spell casting when they were in the training room. When they were studying, Minerva answered any question of Susan's that she could while also helping Harry. Susan and Harry spent some of the studying time working on their summer homework together, trying to get it finished quickly so they would have more time to devote to training. They also spent time together during their free time, getting to know each other better than they had at school. Only a few things of note occurred during the rest of the week. Remus replied to Harry the day after Samina visited, but it wasn't a good one. Throughout the letter, he continuously made excuses for not being there for Harry or not trying to reach out to him after they finally met during Harry's third year. He also urged Harry to listen to Dumbledore and return back to the Dursleys for his safety. Harry didn't write back to him. Harry's sleeping situation was all right, though not as good as when he and Minerva slept together. While he was experiencing nightmares, they weren't as explosive as before thanks to the ward Samina put up. He was even able to settle down enough to go back to sleep if they woke him up. Minerva kept a close eye on him to check for any signs of exhaustion, but he seemed to be getting adequate sleep for right now. Still, Harry missed their previous arrangement more than he cared to admit. Those in the know about the Horcruxes also spent time trying to figure out where they might be hidden. Hestia suggested that one of them might be hidden in places connected to Voldemort's relatives, so they started searching for where they might have lived or any other places that were connected to them. It was hard going, though, since not much was known publicly about the Gaunt family or their former whereabouts. Then on Friday, Harry, Minerva, Tonks, and Andromeda got notices about Sirius's reading that would occur on Monday at 10 in the morning. It took an hour destroying training dummies and a talk from Minerva to calm Harry down. He was upset that he had to go, not wanting to deal with the situation at all, but she and Tonks were able to convince him it was best that he just gets it over with so he could move on. He reluctantly agreed. They also warned him that Dumbledore would likely be there, so he would have to be prepared for that. On Monday, Harry and Minerva left Black Manor half an hour before Sirius's reading was set to start. Andromeda and Tonks were going to come later to avoid anyone suspecting them of being in contact with Harry. When they arrived, a young goblin took them directly to a conference room that was set up for the event. Ripclaw was sitting at the head of the long table and looked up when they entered the room. "Good to see you, Harry, though I'm sure we both wish the circumstances were better," Ripclaw greeted as they both sat down to his right. "And you as well, Professor McGonagall." "Good to see you too, Ripclaw/Manger Ripclaw," Harry and Minerva replied respectively. "May I ask what happened to your face?" Ripclaw asked. Harry, who hadn't covered up his new scar yet, chose his words carefully before answering. "Let's just say I had a fight with a certain being that happens to transform on a certain night of the month. Trust me, he's in a much worse condition than I am. Would I be correct in assuming this individual was one of the most notorious of his kind?" Ripclaw asked knowingly. "I believe you would be," Harry replied. "Then I thank you for the service you have done for the world. While I have no prejudices against him in general, he gave them a bad reputation. He's a big part of why they're so oppressed, so it's good that he's no longer around to cause problems," Ripclaw observed. Harry nodded in acknowledgement. "You're welcome." Ripclaw focused the conversation back onto the reason they were there. "Now, I can see you're a bit nervous about this, but I want to assure that there is nothing for you to be worried about. Mr. Black left a recorded message for the will, so all you have to do is listen to it. As the main beneficiary, you will have the right to kick out anyone who is not mentioned in the will, but that's about all. It's not the will that has me nervous. I just don't want to have to deal with people trying to demand I tell them what I've been up to this summer," Harry clarified. "Well, if it will help you, I can announce that I need to talk to you individually at the conclusion of the reading. That way no one will have time to harass you," Ripclaw suggested. "Thanks, Ripclaw, that would be greatly appreciated," Harry said. "Very well. I will be back when the reading is set to start, but the two of you may remain here," Ripclaw stated before exiting the room. Minerva observed Harry for a moment after the goblin left before speaking up. "How have you been sleeping?" "All right, I guess. The ward doesn't stop the nightmares completely, but it makes them much easier to deal with." Harry hesitated before asking his question. "What about you? I know you said you have them sometimes too." "I've been okay. Thank you for asking." The truth was that she missed sleeping with him, though she wasn't going to say that out loud. It had been so long since she'd shared her bed with someone else that she'd forgotten how much she enjoyed it. She even had a pretty bad nightmare of losing him last night that had her watching him even more than usual to remind herself that he was still alive. "You'll let me know if they start getting worse again, yes?" "Yeah, I promise." You can tell me if yours get bad too." Harry sensed that she wasn't telling him the whole truth, but let it go for the moment. After all, he wasn't doing as well as he claimed either. Instead, he changed the subject. "How do you think Dumbledore is going to react when he sees us?" "He'll likely try to take control of everything before being shot down by Ripclaw. Thankfully, we'll have a reason to leave early. Goblins really are helpful when you treat them with respect. Too bad most are too prejudiced to realize that." Minerva nodded her head in agreement. "So, with that taken care of, all you have to do is remember what we decided earlier. If he tries to get you to meet with him, You tell him when you're available and leave it at that. I just hope I don't lose my temper with him." Minerva scoffed at that. "I'm more worried about me losing my temper and strangling him with his own beard." The cold anger in her tone amplified her words. Harry looked at her warily. "Remind me not to get you that angry with me. Ever. Compared to you, Riddle's no worse than Malfoy. If only the world knew that my ire is your greatest fear." Minerva joked as she shook her head at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "They'd say I'm a wise man," Harry replied sagely. "Seriously, though, I'm sure you'll make it through without hurting him, no matter how much he deserves it. All you have to think about is what would happen to the students if you weren't there to protect them." "I suppose so." A mischievous smirk appeared on Harry's face at the thought that just passed through his head. "Then again, if we do lose our tempers, we could always take over the school and kick Dumbledore, Snape, and Filch out of it. I think your rebelliousness is starting to rub off on me, because that idea sounds entirely too tempting. Welcome to the gray side of the Force, Minerva. I should have never watched Star Wars with you. It's a great trilogy, and you know it. If you say so, you know you like the movies just as much as I did. I can neither confirm nor deny that. Why can't you just admit I'm right? Where's the fun in that?" The smirk on Minerva's face had Harry's thoughts traveling in an inappropriate direction, and it took all of his occlumency training to prevent that from becoming noticeable. Once Harry regained control of his thoughts, the two of them joked around for the rest of the time they had to wait. Minerva did it to cheer Harry up and keep his mind off of Sirius's death. When Ripclaw returned to the room, it was to the sound of their laughter. "The others have arrived, so whenever you're ready, we can begin," the goblin announced. Harry and Minerva strengthened their mental shields and fixed their expressions to reflect the seriousness of the occasion before Harry nodded for Ripclaw to start. Minerva also made sure to glamour Harry's scar from Greyback to avoid arousing suspicion for now. The door opened again a moment later as everyone began to file into the room. The group consisted of the Weasley parents, the twins, Ron, Ginny, Hermione, Remus, Dumbledore, the Tonks. Women, Mrs. Malfoy, and Draco. Tonks winked at Harry as she sat down across from him, making him smirk for a moment. Dumbledore looked pointedly at Minerva in an attempt to sit down by Harry, but received only a stoic expression in return. Silent request refused. He made do with sitting beside Andromeda on the opposite side of them, causing the woman to look annoyed for a fleeting moment. Remus also tried to get Harry's attention, but was completely ignored. Fudge tried to come into the room as well, but was barred by the goblin guard standing at the door. The minister tried to protest, but he was ignored. Ripclaw turned to Harry, his tone formal. "As the main beneficiary, you have the right to decide if those who are not listed in the will can attend." "Tell him he's not invited," Harry replied calmly. "Now see here," is all Fudge managed to get out before the door was shut in his face. They could hear him arguing with the guards for a moment until they got too far away. "Well, let's begin then," Ripclaw stated as he sat down at the head of the table. Before Dumbledore could interrupt him, the goblin pressed on. "Now, as you all know, you are here to witness the reading of Sirius Orion Black's will. He prepared a recorded message for the occasion, so I will play it now." Ripclaw touched his finger to the black square object that was on the table in front of him. After a few seconds, a ghostly image of Sirius appeared out of it and began speaking. "I, Sirius Orion Black, being of sound mind, body, and magic, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. All other wills made before this day are now canceled and revoked. This will expresses my wishes and desires without undue influence or duress. Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Now that the legal stuff is out of the way, I can get to the fun part. Giving my family's stuff away to the kind of people most of them detested. First, to Molly and Arthur, I give you 50,000 galleons. Thank you for welcoming Harry into your family and taking care of him like one of your own. To Gret and Forge, as Harry calls you, I give you 30,000 galleons. Thank you for looking out for Harry as surrogate big brothers and teaching the fine art of mischief when I couldn't. Use this money to start your store and make it the big success I know will be to bring more laughter into a world that desperately needs it. To Ron, Ginny, and Hermione, I give you 15,000 galleons each. Thank you for being such good friends to Harry. Merlin knows he needed it. I just ask that you continue to stand beside him for the dangers still ahead. I also give Hermione a collection of ancient books that my family had. Don't worry, None of them are dangerous, but they're filled with plenty of knowledge that I'm sure you'll appreciate. To Remus Lupin, I give you 20,000 galleons. I'm sorry I left you two, mate, but I'm ordering you to take care of yourself. Also, don't forget the promise we made James and Lily. Look out for him like we swore we would do. To Andy and Dora, I give you each 50,000 galleons and formally bring you back into the family with all the rights and privileges that entails. I only hope that you will be the family Harry needs and help guide him to reach his potential and survive this war. To Minerva, I give you all of the ancient transfiguration texts my family had, as well as 10,000 galleons to make up for all of the chaos I caused you. Take care of him for me. Now for Narcissa and Draco, I give you a proposition. If you renounce your pure-blood ways and stop following a certain dark lord, I offer you a safe place to live and a vault to help you survive. If not, then you get nothing. As for Albus, I want you to leave Harry alone and let him live his life. You've already ruined enough of it. Finally, to Harry, my wonderful godson, I leave you everything else. I've already written down most of what I wanted to say to you, but I want to give you one last piece of advice. Tell her how you feel. She deserves to know, and you both deserve to be happy. You have watched Listen to the Will of Sirius Black. So mote it be. They all sat in silence for a moment as they took in what they'd heard. Draco was the one who broke it. I object to being given nothing. I'm supposed to be Lord Black. Narcissa grabbed his shoulder before he could rise from his seat. Not now, Draco, she whispered harshly into his ear. Unfortunately for you, that position is already filled, Ripclaw corrected. Unless the current Lord Black would like to relinquish that position, you have no claim to it. He turned toward Harry expectantly. Not happening, Harry simply replied. Knowing that now wasn't the best time to make a scene, Narcissa led her son out of the room before he did something both would regret. It didn't stop the boy from yelling out threats and insults as he was dragged away. Harry only smirked in response, while Ron and the twins laughed heartily. That was great, Harry, Ron said between laughs. Yes, very amusing, Ripclaw agreed, before focusing back onto the meeting. Now for the rest of you that have been bequeathed. Something. These forms will tell you how to retrieve it from the vaults that were created for you. As Ripclaw handed those out, Dumbledore turned to speak to Harry. Harry, where have you been staying, and why did you think it was okay for you to leave your family when you know of the defenses erected around your home to protect all of you? Harry mentally took a deep breath before responding. First, you have lost the right to call me Harry, so it's Lord Black or Mr. Potter to you. Second, don't call those people my family, because they're not. Third, that place has never been and will never be my home. Fourth, they've never cared about my safety, so why should I care about theirs? Fifth, I'm much safer where I am now than I ever was there. And finally, I don't have to answer your questions because I'm no longer under your control. I'm emancipated and well within my rights to make my own decisions, whether you like it or not. Those not in the know looked at Harry in shock, while the others wore self-satisfied smirks. Dumbledore missed these expressions except for the one on Minerva's face. Dumbledore ignored that for the moment. Harry, you will come with, so I can take you back to the Dursleys where you belong. And we will talk about your disappointing and reckless behavior. No, he won't. Minerva interjected before Harry could respond. Minerva, did you know where Harry was all this time? Dumbledore snapped. Not at first, but yes. And before you ask, I didn't tell you because he asked me not to, and you've given me no reason to trust you with that information anyway. Look, Harry cut in before Dumbledore could speak. If you want to talk to me, I'll be available tomorrow evening, but not before then. And it has to be in a neutral location. You can send me a letter with the details, and as long as you stick to my terms, I'll show up. Ripclaw, who had finished passing out the forms, realized it was time to cut in. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Harry and I have some more matters to attend to in private. Harry mentally thanked the goblin. Now, as you've heard, need to speak with Ragnock. I hope you all have a good day, but I must be going. Right this way, Harry, Ripclaw said as he began to walk out of the room. Harry and Minerva got up and followed him out. Minerva, where are you going? Dumbledore asked irately before they had reached the door. Sedwich spun around on her heel and fixed him with a steely glare. I've been asked by his godfather to take care of him, and I intend to do so, regardless of your feelings on the matter. Then she and Harry continued to walk out the door, slamming it firmly once outside. They could just hear the sound of Molly questioning Dumbledore as they walked down the hallway. Once inside Ripclaw's office, Harry thanked the goblin for his assistance. "Hey Minerva, do we have time to visit the Potter Vault before I take my apparition test?" Harry asked. "I don't see why not, as long as it's a short visit," Minerva replied. "I will send for someone to escort you," Ripclaw said as he reached for a button on the side of his desk. A minute later, a young goblin arrived. They said their goodbyes before following him out. After a much longer cart ride than Harry or Minerva were used to, they were standing in front of the Potter Vault. Their escort waited outside after telling Harry how to give Minerva permission to enter. The vault was pretty big inside, and Harry was a bit overwhelmed by the amount of stuff it contained for a moment until Minerva explained that it was likely things his family had collected over the centuries. The two of them walked around for about 5 minutes before Harry was drawn to the jewelry of all things and Minerva the books. He told her that she could have any book she wanted before heading in his own direction. There were several pieces of priceless items, but he was drawn specifically to the necklaces. As he looked at them, Sirius's words echoed in his mind, and he couldn't help glancing back at Minerva for a second. He examined them more closely, but didn't see one that truly called to him. Then he noticed some lumps of raw gold and silver to the side. Moving closer, he picked up the note that was beside them, which explained that the materials could be used for custom-made jewelry that was easy to enchant. The metals themselves were imbued with Potter family magic to offer some basic protections. Harry turned to watch Minerva again for a few moments as he thought through the turmoil in his mind. Unable to convince himself otherwise, he grabbed 2 lumps of the silver and slipped it into his pocket. Then he walked over to her, trying to avoid looking suspicious. "See anything you like?" he asked her when she didn't notice him after a few seconds. Minerva turned around, shocked that he was standing behind her. Yes. There are a few here that have caught my interest." "Then take them." Harry held up his hand. "No protests from you, Minerva. I said you could have any book you wanted, and I meant it. You know I likely won't read them, and there's no point in them going to waste and collecting dust inside this vault. Not when someone I trust wants to read them. Besides, giving you a few books is nothing compared to all you've done for me. Teaching me in secret, even though I know for a fact you're not really a fan of secrets. Visiting me at the Dursleys during your order shifts. Taking me shopping so I could have clothes that actually fit me. Getting me to enjoy life more instead of focusing on the negatives. And taking care of me, even after I pushed you away. I wouldn't be alive or sane if it weren't for you. So please take them." She was touched by his open and honest words and replied in a soft voice. "Thank you, Harry." Harry gave her a soft smile that made her heart flutter a bit. "You're welcome, Minerva." For almost a whole minute, they gazed into each other's eyes and unconsciously drifted closer to before coming to their senses. The 2 lumps of silver in Harry's pocket felt a bit heavier, and his mouth was dry as he spoke up again. "I'm done looking around for the moment, so we can go if you're ready." Minerva, who was just as affected by the moment, grabbed the 3 books that had caught her interest before telling him she was ready. The ride back to the main atrium of the bank was silent, as both contemplated the effect their exchange had on them. It was half an hour later when Harry and Minerva returned to Black Manor, Harry's apparition license in tow. He had passed the test with flying colors, something Minerva was very proud of even though she had expected it. Susan, Tonks, and Andromeda congratulated him, as well as they all sat in the kitchen to have lunch. The rest of the day was mostly uneventful. Minerva had Winky prepare some treacle tart for dessert to celebrate Harry's success at dinner with everyone else. Harry and Minerva were a bit distracted for the rest of the day, though since their thoughts kept straying back to their moment in the vault, even though they tried to push it to the back of their minds. The next day, Minerva's friend Matthew arrived right before lunchtime. She had to go back to her home to retrieve him and give him access to the manor. After talking to the man for a few minutes, Harry decided that he definitely liked him. Matthew just had that easygoing personality that was hard to dislike. After getting to know each other more and eating lunch, Matthew began explaining the natural Animagus process in a little more detail, making sure Harry understood what he was about to undertake. "All right, well, I'm sure Minerva here has already explained how the process will go, so I'll just make sure you understand exactly what will happen." "Go ahead," Harry replied, gesturing for Matthew to continue. "Okay. So starting tonight, you will be taking the potion that will give you the visions as you sleep. You'll have to take them at around the same time every night, though it won't put you instantly to sleep. The visions themselves will consume your mind the entire night. so you won't have any dreams or nightmares and will feel very well rested in the morning. Will I still be able to wake up early? We train at 4 in the morning. Yes. As long as you set an alarm, your body will wake up like normal. Good. I'm liking the sound of this process even more. Matthew laughed with Harry for a moment before continuing. Yes, it definitely has its benefits. Anyway, these visions are designed to teach you all about your animal form, so pay close attention to them. It helps to write about them every morning when you first wake up, so you don't forget what you learned. Then, on the day of the transformation, you will take a different potion that will force you to change. This won't hurt, but it will feel very disorienting. After that, you'll be stuck in your form for 12 hours as you get accustomed to it. Minerva and I will be with you in our own Animagus forms the entire time to keep watch over you. It's also probably best that all of us get plenty of rest during the day so we'll have enough energy for the night. In my animal form, will I try to hurt you? I can guess that I won't be able to control my animal instincts at all for my first transformation, and my animal might be a predator to yours. I don't want you guys helping me if it puts you into danger. Harry had just increased his esteem in Matthew's eyes at his show of genuine concern. You are correct that you won't be able to control your instincts, but as Animagi, Minerva and I will not register as a threat or prey to you. Even in your first transformation, you will be able to recognize us as Animagi and won't attack us, especially since you already know us. Okay, good. Will the transformation tire me out any? Yes, it will. So I'll need you to avoid using magic for 24 hours after it unless necessary. You can work on using your form after you've gotten enough rest. I'm sure Minerva will make sure you get rest even if you don't, though. Harry chuckled at that. That's an understatement. That woman can be scary when she wants to be. Speaking from experience, thankfully not really aimed at me, but I've definitely seen enough of her dangerous side to know not to get on it. Wise words that. After seeing how well Harry and Matthew were getting along, Minerva left them alone for a few hours. She knew how much Harry needed a male role model in his life, especially after losing Sirius, and Matthew was a good candidate for that position. He was intelligent, kind, patient, and had a good sense of humor. He also knew how to deal with someone who's had a rough life growing up, something that described his own childhood. So, she retreated to the living room to read one of the books she'd gotten from the Potter Vault. The two wizards made their way to the training room after talking for a bit longer. Matthew, wanting to see how good Harry was for himself, challenged the young wizard to a duel. After the first one ended with his defeat, Matthew realized that Minerva might have understated how talented Harry was. Not only was he fast and athletic, but he could think on his feet quicker than anyone he's ever seen. And that wasn't even counting just how predictable he was. They dueled 4 more times, with both winning half of them. Man, Ace, Minerva wasn't kidding about you. You really are something else, Matthew exclaimed as they walked toward the living room. He had given Harry the nickname in between duels after seeing how well Harry fought. I've been fighting to survive my whole life. Plus, I had a really good teacher, Harry replied modestly. That is very true. Matthew stopped to stretch his back, groaning as the aching muscles popped. I haven't worked that hard in a fight in a long time. Harry glanced at him, a mischievous smirk on his face. Really? I'm not feeling tired at all. Maybe you should stay here a while and work on your endurance so you can keep up with me, old man. Old man! Don't get cocky, Ace. I'll have you know I've been dueling since before you were even thought of. My point exactly. After a second, they burst out laughing and Matthew threw his arm around Harry's shoulders. They started talking about their duels in more details, with Matthew giving Harry some pointers on things he could improve on to be even better than he already was. When the two of them entered the living room, joking and laughing, Minerva, who had been reading quietly on the sofa, had to pause and watch them for a moment. It warmed her heart to see Harry so happy and carefree. Merlin knows he needs more of it in his life. She made a mental note to ask Matthew if he was willing to stay for a bit longer before addressing them. What have you two been up to? She asked, her eyebrow raised at their disheveled appearance. Oh, I was just showing this old-timer how it's done in the training room, Harry claimed, puffing out his chest dramatically. How many times did he beat you? Minerva asked, a mischievous smile on her face. 3 out of 5. And thanks for the warning, Minerva. You said he was good, but you didn't mention he was a prodigy. I told you he was good enough to pass his newts in defense and transfiguration. What did you think that meant? Minerva asked. Not this. If he duels the proctor, he could probably get his mastery in defense automatically, Matthew insisted. I don't think I'm that good, Harry mumbled. You are Harry. Just accept it, Minerva asserted. Harry shook his head at them, not seeing why they were making such a big deal about him. He was only that good because he had to be to stay alive, if you ask him. If you say so. I'm going to take a shower. He doesn't take compliments well, does he? Matthew queried after Harry had left. Minerva shook her head sadly. Unfortunately not. Most of his life he's been told he's worthless, so it's hard for him to accept that he isn't. I try to convince him otherwise, but I'm only partially successful. Poor kid. He really is deserving of the praise. The 2 times I did manage to best him, it was a close thing. Honestly, in a real-world situation, I don't think I'd stand a chance. Don't feel too bad. He would probably give me a hard time at this point. You haven't dueled him before? Not recently. I've been too busy teaching him as many spells and tactics as I can lately. Plus, he's been working on developing his elemental skills and studying for the tests. And that's not including everything else that's been going on. You should rectify that situation soon and when I'm there to witness it. That'll definitely be something to watch. Matthew went quiet for a moment before becoming serious. After what you've told me and meeting Harry, I think I'm going to stay for a while, if you don't mind. I want to help you both. Minerva smiled knowingly. He managed to charm you too, then? Yes, that young man is something special. I don't even know most of his story. Yet I can see how amazing it is that he's still such a good person despite all of the evil he's seen and experienced. If I can help make his future better than his past seems to have been, then I'm going to do it. He deserves it much more than most. Thank you, Matthew. We're glad to have you. Sadly, Dumbledore actually took Harry's advice and asked him to meet at the Burrow in the evening. So, after an early dinner, Harry and Minerva operated over there, separately now that Harry had his own license. They were greeted at the door by Ron and Ginny. Dumbledore's in the kitchen waiting for you. Ginny informed them once the guests were inside and the door closed. Yeah, and he brought our greasy git of a potions professor with him, Ron added, disgust in his tone. Of course, he had to bring him with him, Harry complained. If I had known that beforehand, I might not have come. At least you don't have to deal with him in your house for every order meeting, Ron pointed out. Harry nodded in commiseration. Sorry about that, guys. I'd let them come back to the old headquarters, but I don't want people I don't trust to be able to stroll in and out of my home, especially seeing as we're currently using it as our own headquarters, Minerva remarked. Plus, Dobby, Winky, and Creature didn't do all of that hard work for it to be wasted on the order, Harry added, only half-jokingly. Don't worry, Harry, we understand, Ginny replied. Though, if you want to get us a nice Christmas present, we won't object, Ron quipped. Ginny and Minerva shook their heads at him, while Harry chuckled lightly. Come on, Ron. You know we have to get upstairs before Mum yells at us for being nosy, Ginny stated as she pulled him away from the door. Fine, but make sure to tell us all about what happened later, Ron said as he was dragged away. Once the 2 youngest Weasleys were out of sight, Harry let out a breath of frustration. That manipulative bastard just had to bring him here. If he thought it was going to be hard to get answers from me before, he just made it even worse for himself. I refuse to let that Death Eater learn anything useful about what I've been doing and where I've been staying. Center yourself, Harry, Minerva instructed urgently, her hand on his shoulder comfortingly. Snape being here is Dumbledore's attempt to make you lose your control. Do not let it work. Harry took a deep cleansing breath. You're right, though I can't promise that I'll just ignore all the insults he'll throw at me. I'm not asking you to, nor would I expect it of you. I know that I won't. I'm simply saying you need to keep your composure. Harry took a few calming breaths, making sure that his occlumency shields were in place. All right, let's go deal with them before I change my mind. The 2 of them walked to the kitchen with their shoulders squared, greeting Molly and Arthur politely before entering the room. Dumbledore sat on one side of the table, with Snape standing behind him on his left. The 2 glanced at the wizards before sitting on the opposite side of the table. Harry sat forward with his arms folded on the table, while Minerva sat back with hers folded across her chest, both with challenging expressions on their faces. A silence enveloped the room as the 2 men tried to intimidate them with their mere presence. It failed. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Harry, though I didn't ask for Minerva to attend as well, Dumbledore greeted, quirking an eyebrow at the witch. First, it's Mr. Potter to you, and if you keep on insisting on calling me by my first name, then this meeting will be over, Harry replied, his tone calm. Second, she is here because I asked her to come with me. I could ask the same of Snape, But I don't really want to get into that argument right now. It's Professor Snape to you. It's time that you learn to respect your betters, boy. Snape cut in contemptuously. Harry scoffed at him. When you decide to act like a professor and actually teach your classes, then I'll call you one. As for respecting my betters, I only give respect to those who have either earned it from me or given me no reason to not respect them. You've done neither. That attitude proves you are nothing more than an immature little boy. You cannot blame me for your failure in my subject. That is due to your incompetence and refusal to pay attention. Harry barely managed to stop himself from retorting angrily. Instead, he replied with a dismissive remark. Correcting you is not worth my time right now. Then, before Snape could respond, he changed the subject. Anyway, I think we should focus on the reason for this meeting so we can get it over with. I'd rather not spend any more time in either of your presences any longer than I have to. Ask your questions, Dumbledore, though I can't promise I'll give you the answers you want, especially since you brought him with you. Dumbledore fixed his expression into his grandfatherly persona before responding, making Harry and Minerva roll their eyes at him. In their heads, "Ah, Mr. Potter, you must tell me where you've been since school let out." "No, I don't. All you need to know is that I am safer there than I've ever been at the Dursleys," Harry replied simply. "That is not good enough. It was a very reckless and selfish decision you made to run away from your home and leave your family defenseless. I told you yesterday to stop calling that place my home and those people my family because it's not true. As for being reckless and selfish, that's your opinion. I did what I had to do for my own sanity, something I care about even if you don't. Just as arrogant and self-centered as your father," Snape muttered aloud. "What did the Muggles do? Not fix your breakfast the way you wanted." Harry glared at the spiteful man, his tone cold. "No, they've never made me breakfast at all. Or lunch. Or dinner. So, forgive me for not really caring what happens to them one way or the other." "Do you really care nothing for them after they took you into their home?" "Those people only took me in because you dumped me on their doorstep and forced them to do so. I owe them nothing. If you care so much about what happens to them, then you can tell them to move. You and your relatives may disagree, but it still is the safest place for you to stay. The wards I was able to erect around the property based on your mother's sacrifice ensure that. It didn't protect me from the danger inside the house. Regardless, if you will not tell me where you are currently, then I cannot allow you to remain there. Not when I'm unable to reach you. Therefore, you will have to return to the Dursleys, and I will talk to them to make sure they treat you better." Minerva, her hands clenched in anger at Dumbledore's dismissal of the Dursleys' abuse, shared a glance with Harry before speaking up. "If you must know, he's been staying with me for the past 3 weeks. Unless you don't think I'm capable of protecting him, that answer should suffice." Dumbledore still wasn't able to reach Harry there either, but that was a good thing as far as she was concerned. Dumbledore turned his attention on Minerva. "Why didn't you tell me you knew where he was? The Order has been looking all over for him, yet you remained silent. I told you to stop looking for him, but you didn't listen." "That is not my fault," Minerva dismissed. "How could I, when you gave us no reason not to? You didn't tell us that you knew where he was. I told you that if Voldemort had no idea where he was, then he had to be in a safe place, and to give him time to come to terms with everything that had happened to him. When he did reach out to me, I did what was in Harry's best interest, something you don't seem to understand. It is in Harry's best interest that he remains at the Dursleys' home, where I and the Order can guard him. When you found him, you should have brought him back there. I will not force anyone to go back to an abusive environment. And that's not even counting the fact that he just lost his godfather and should be with people who care about him to help him heal. It may seem harsh, but it is for the greater good, Minerva." Harry scoffed at that answer. "And there we go. Your go-to answer to explain all of your decisions, good or bad. Well, guess what? I don't care too much for your so-called greater good, not when it's used to justify you allowing me to be abused for years. Not when it's used to justify you failing or refusing to protect the students of Hogwarts from dangerous threats, instead luring me and my friends to deal with it. Not when it's used to justify you ruining others' lives to avoid anyone being able to disrupt your plans. Not when it's used to justify you treating me like a pawn and a weapon instead of a human being. You are obviously too young and immature to understand that great sacrifice is sometimes needed to save the world," Dumbledore said patronizingly. "I think I understand sacrifice better than you do. After all, you're always talking about it and its importance, yet I seem to be the one sacrificing the most for this world right now. I've given up my childhood, my innocence, and my freedom. How much have you given? I have had to make many hard decisions to ensure the safety of this world. Dumbledore's tone was self-righteous as he sat up straighter in his chair. Yet Harry is the one who bears the majority of the weight of those choices. Not you, Minerva countered, heat in her tone. You talk about making all of these sacrifices, yet you're not the one who suffers for them. Innocent people, especially Harry, do. Of course, you would take up for that spoiled brat, Snape spat. You seem incapable of seeing who he really is, just like you couldn't see his father or Black for who they were. Minerva turned her ire on the unpleasant man. Coming from the man who can't get over a grudge he has with a man that has been dead for almost 14 years. Her voice got a bit louder at the end. The sad part is that Harry isn't a carbon copy of his father, like you've convinced yourself of. His personality, and his heart, especially, is much more like his mother's. You're just too blinded by your rage to see it. He is nothing like Lily. Snape denied. Minerva glared at him. He is a lot like Lily, and she would incensed at how you have treated her son over the years. If she were still alive, you would be facing her full wrath for your actions. Enough! Dumbledore shouted, before wands could be drawn. The grandfatherly persona was completely gone now, as anger shone clearly on his face. I'm very disappointed in both of you. Harry, you never should have allowed yourself to become emancipated as. It is clear you cannot handle the responsibilities that come with being an adult. Your recent actions were selfish and rash. Running away proves that you are still no more than a child, despite all you've been through. You also refuse to see reason or listen to the advice of those with more wisdom and experience than you. Dumbledore addressed Minerva next. As for you, Minerva, it seems that you have become too close to the boy, and it is clouding your judgment. You have allowed your affection for him to cause you to make dangerous decisions, based on emotion instead of logic. If you refuse to stand down, I will have no choice but to limit your interactions with him. How are you going to stop us? Harry asked dangerously. He and Minerva had tensed up at Dumbledore's words, anger increasing with every syllable he uttered. Dumbledore stood up, his posture straight and imposing as he tried to intimidate them into compliance. For you, Harry, I will have to bring you back to the Dursleys, by force if necessary, where you will remain under guard until it is time for you to return back to school. I cannot allow your immature and selfish desires ruin our efforts in this war. As for you, Minerva, if you will not stand aside, I will be forced to relieve you of your duties at Hogwarts. I cannot have someone who is willing to put their feelings ahead of the safety of the students in charge of their care. I'm sorry if this upsets you both, but it is for your own good. All four of them were standing now, with their wands drawn on each other. How dare you accuse me of the exact thing you've been doing for the past 5 years, if not longer? And you have completely lost your mind if you think I will stand aside as you attempt to kidnap and imprison him, Minerva declared. Her voice was filled with cold fury and indignation. Consider this my resignation from the Order. I will not be part of a group that is led by a man who condones this. And if you try to fire her, I'm leaving with her, Harry added in the same tone. So, you need to decide if this is the route you want to go on. Because if you try to kidnap me, I won't hesitate to treat you like an enemy. Neither will I, Minerva asserted. Empty words, Potter. You are too weak to attack us, Snape sneered. I can assure you he is not. I'd advise you to get over yourself and see him for who he truly is before you regret it, Minerva warned ominously. She's right, you know. I've had quite the interesting summer so far. Want to see what new skills I've learned firsthand? Harry taunted. So, this is what it's come to, Dumbledore said sadly as he held his hand up to stop Snape from responding. This is what you've caused, Harry corrected. Your actions and the decisions you've made concerning me have led to this and pushed me to my breaking point. Riddle may have murdered my parents, but you stole my childhood and my innocence from me by leaving me with the Dursleys with no one to help me. You've continued to see me only as a weapon, with no feelings or desires of my own, using me when you need me and throwing me away when you don't. Did you really think I was going to accept that treatment forever? Did you think I wouldn't retaliate and take control of my life at some point? I have always only done what was best for you and your safety, Dumbledore tried. No, you haven't. But it doesn't matter anymore because from now on, I will make my own decisions and fight this war the way I see fit, whether you like it or not, Harry stated. You are truly delusional if you think you stand any chance against the Dark Lord, Snape scorned. I know he does, and he won't be on his own, Minerva defended. You have a decision to make then. Either stand down or be prepared to fight, because I will no longer allow anyone to use or control me. No matter who they are, Harry declared. Before Dumbledore could respond, Molly and Arthur burst into the room, having heard the raised voices and felt the ominous atmosphere in the air. What is going on here? Molly shrieked in distress, breaking the tense atmosphere. Why do you all have your wands drawn? Arthur asked as he put his arm around his wife. Seeing that he could no longer enact his plans, Dumbledore fixed a contrite expression onto his face and spoke in a mournful tone. I see that I need to rethink my treatment of you since you feel this way, Mr. Potter. I never intended to cause you so much grief, but it seems that I have. If you are staying with Minerva, then I am at least assured of your safety. I will endeavor to treat you differently from now on. Dumbledore gestured for Snape to follow him before they both left the room reluctantly. Harry and Minerva didn't drop their guard until they heard the sound of the flue being used. Molly, who was still trying to get over her surprise, turned to them, confusion written clearly on her face. Harry, what is going on between you and Albus? Why were the four of you about to fight? Harry sighed, not wanting to upset her or Arthur any further, but also not wanting to lie to them. It's a long story, Mrs. Weasley, but the short of it is that I've decided to make my own decisions for my life, and Dumbledore has a problem with it. I'm sorry for causing you any worry and distress, now and with my disappearance, but I have to make the choices that are best for me right now. Minerva spoke up next, seeing the questions in their eyes. I know you're very confused right now, but I want you to do something before you ask anything else. I want you to objectively look back at the many decisions Dumbledore has made and the results of them. Then ask yourself who he really is. It will be hard to come to terms with, but it is important that you do so. Arthur, seeing how serious the two of them were, nodded in acceptance. Okay, Minerva, we will try our best to do that. After that, the two of them left the burrow, leaving behind two very confused and scared people. Once they were outside of the wards, Harry turned to face Minerva. I don't trust him. This argument isn't over. Neither do I, but at least he will leave us alone for the moment, Minerva pointed out. For now, we will take advantage of the break. You're right, Harry agreed. Then he surprised both of them by pulling the woman into a hug, holding her tightly. Thank you for standing up for me back there. I really appreciate it. Minerva pulled back so she could look him in the eyes. I promised you I would do everything within my power to help you, and I meant it. That includes preventing self-righteous, egotistic, manipulative old men from kidnapping you. She ran her hand through his hair gently. I'm on your side, Harry. Never doubt that. Harry nodded in acknowledgement, unable to voice how much that meant to him, though Minerva could see it in his eyes. Then they pulled away from each other and operated back to Black Manor. When the two of them arrived in the manor, everyone was sitting in the living room waiting for them in a tense silence. So, how did it go? What did he say? What did he do? Tonks asked impatiently, not giving them time to sit down. Give them a chance to breath first, Dora, Andromeda chastised. The group laughed at their exchange for a moment, breaking the tension in the room. Harry and Minerva sat down in the empty space of a sofa by Amelia and Matthew before they began explaining everything that had happened. By the time they were finished, not one person wasn't filled with righteous anger. I don't know if we can let him keep his post as headmaster any longer, Amelia observed. It might be too dangerous for all of the students, Andromeda agreed. Everyone else voiced their agreement. But how will we do it? Susan asked. Yeah, too many people look up to him and believe he can do no wrong, Charlie pointed out. True, but Harry here has just as much, if not more, influence as well, Tonks said. There are also many more families than you'd realize who have grievances with him and the decisions he's made. Some are tired of him acting like he wants to make change, when in reality, he does very little to improve things in our country, Hestia explained. Even with all of that, it will still be hard to get him removed, Harry said. They thought on that for a moment before Fleur came up with an idea. What if you went directly to the board of directors of YEA school? Maybe you could convince them that Dumbledore is not fit to be YEA headmaster any longer. That might work, Amelia said after mulling it over for a second. We would have to make a very convincing case for this to work, Andromeda noted, and we would have to be prepared to fill any positions that would be lost. They aren't going to want to have to do that themselves, Minerva added. Well, you could be the headmistress. After all, you're the deputy already, Harry declared. Then we would just have to find professors for transfiguration, defense, and potions because we are definitely not letting Snape stay either. History of magic as well, Minerva said. It's time we had someone alive teaching that class. If you can't find anyone else, I don't mind teaching transfiguration, Matthew offered. I could teach history as well, Andromeda suggested. At least it would be more accurate and inclusive. I was planning on taking a break from my practice anyway, with everything that's going on. What about defense? Harry said, causing everyone to look at him pointedly. Not this again. As future headmistress, I doubt I could find anyone better suited for that position, and definitely not someone I trust more than you to do it, Minerva insisted. But if the thought overwhelms you too much, then either Dora or Hestia could help you so you're not doing it alone. Harry shook his head. No, I'll do it. Just be prepared for me asking you for help often until I figure it all out. If Minerva had that much faith in him, then he had to trust her judgment. My door will always be open to you if you need me, Minerva replied. Harry nodded in thanks. And you can always ask Hermione to help you with organizing your lesson plans, Susan stated. Harry and those who knew Hermione well enough laughed in agreement. Now you just need a potions professor, Fleur said. I might be able to convince Samina to do it if I ask her, Minerva proposed. Well, sounds like you have everything you need, Charlie summed up. Now we just have to put together a very convincing argument. Operation Takeover Magical Britain, or TOMB for short, begins. Tonks exclaimed gleefully, rubbing her hands together dramatically. Ze whole Magical Britain? Fleur asked in confusion. Well, we already plan on having Fudge kicked out of office and Boss here elected as Minister of Magic. Now we're going to have Dumbledore removed and replaced by Minerva. That means we'll be in charge of the Ministry and Hogwarts, which are the two most powerful places in Magical Britain, Tonks explained. Harry nodded in agreement. Operation TOMB, it is then Chapter 13, and some plans are starting to come to fruition in this chapter. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 13. It was July 30th, the night of the full moon, and almost time for Harry, Minerva, and Matthew to head over to Minerva's house where they would be for the transformation. Through the potion visions he'd taken for the past 6 days, Harry had learned his Animagus form was a gray wolf. Curious about whether his encounter with Greyback had influenced this, he asked Matthew about it, who confirmed that it was highly likely. Harry was fine with that, though, because wolves happened to be his favorite animal anyway. Like Matthew suggested, Harry wrote down what he saw and learned from his visions every morning. The more he learned, the more he got excited about becoming an Animagus. Wolves were even cooler than he realized. They were very intelligent, fast, and had a lot of stamina. They could adapt to extreme climates when necessary. They were also friendly and family-oriented within their packs. Overall, he was more than satisfied with his animal. Even Minerva, who teased him for not being a cat, which she claimed were superior, couldn't help but think that being a wolf fit his personality. As Harry got himself mentally prepared for the experience, he reflected on everything that had happened since his and Minerva's argument with Dumbledore and Snape. At the end of the next day's training session, Harry and Minerva informed the others about what had occurred. All of them were furious at Dumbledore and Snape's attempt to kidnap and imprison Harry, shocked that the man would go so far to control him. They readily agreed with the plans that had been made so far and pledged their assistance in any way they could. After further discussion, it was decided that they would all need to spend more time together, so arrangements were made to make it possible for those who were underage to come over during the day. The twins managed to convince their mom to let Ron and Ginny help out at the shop to get them out of the house without rousing suspicion. Molly was nervous about her two youngest being away from home. Ultimately, she trusted the twins to keep them safe, though. She and her husband were also starting to realize that all wasn't as it seemed concerning Dumbledore and the Order, and were taking the time to figure out what to do about it. The more they thought back on all of the man's actions, the more they agreed with Harry and Minerva. Amelia went with Neville to convince his grandmother to let him spend his days at Black Manor training. They also told her a bit about their grievances with Dumbledore, though they didn't give away too many details. When Madame Longbottom asked Neville why he wanted to fight in the war by Harry's side, he gave her two reasons. One, that he was sure Harry was the only one capable of stopping Voldemort for good. Two, that he made a promise to stick by Harry's side, and as a Longbottom, it wasn't in his blood to go back on a promise. Madame Longbottom was so proud of Neville in that moment that she pulled him into a warm hug, a rare occurrence, and gave him her full support. Hermione's parents were a lot harder to convince, however. They had been very upset when they found out their daughter had been injured and almost killed at the end of the school year, and were set on taking her out of the country for her safety. Harry and Minerva vowed to protect her as best as they could, but were forced to acknowledge that the war wasn't safe. The Grangers' fears were so great that it almost had Harry agreeing with their desire to take Hermione as far away from Britain as possible. However, Hermione managed to win them over after much discussion. She pointed out that Harry needed her help, and they would be forcing her to break her promise if they took her away. She also explained how it would be better for her to learn how to better protect herself than to run away. In the end, the Grangers agreed to let Hermione stay at Black Manor for the rest of the summer after Minerva assured them of its safety. Harry also offered to have their home warded to keep them safe as well, something they readily agreed to, and that had Hermione hugging him tightly for his thoughtfulness. Luna's father was by far the easiest to convince, and she needed no help to get him to agree, though Charlie went just in case. In fact, he offered to let her stay at the manor on his own after Luna told him who all would be there. He figured she would be safer within the manor's wards and around so many qualified magicals than with him alone. With the group all having more time together, things changed a bit. They still trained in the morning, but the structure of it was different. 2 hours were spent on physical conditioning while they worked on occlumency for the last hour. Since everyone was in much better shape after all of their exercising, Harry, with the Aurors and Minerva's help, started teaching them unarmed combat. This was to give them the ability to keep fighting even if they lost their wand, something he knew the Death Eaters would be unprepared for. The magical training, on the other hand, was done during the day in the training room of the manor. With more time, the trainees were taught even more spells while also learning how to fight together as a team, something the trainers joined in on when they could. Some time was also spent studying, on Hermione's insistence, of course. After a few days of working together, all of the students had their homework completed. This gave them more time to focus on everything else. All of the trainees made much more progress with the extra time they had now. While he was busy with many other things, Harry hadn't forgotten about his ability to spy on Voldemort. He had been making good on his promise to Amelia, giving her knowledge of 2 more Death Eater raids he'd managed to learn of from Voldemort's mind. With the advanced warnings, she and her Aurors were able to successfully stop them and save the intended victims. They even captured a few to interrogate, learning of 2 safe houses for them to raid. These successes were splashed all over the front page of the newspapers, courtesy of David, causing many Death Eaters much pain and suffering for their failures being displayed for all of the country to see. Harry felt Voldemort's anger and frustration through their link, giving him a huge sense of satisfaction to be part of its cause. As for Operation Tomb and their others' plans, progress had been made in those areas as well. Hermione helped Harry with his lesson plans and picking out books for the students. They both went to Minerva when they needed a more experienced advice. On Andromeda's suggestion, they went to a lesser-known bookstore where they sold better books on data. Andromeda helped Matthew organize his lesson plans while she worked on her own, since he'd never been a formal professor either. Meanwhile, Amelia and Andromeda continued to prepare Harry for the Wizengamot meeting. The twins, with Ginny's help, started working on creating tools and weapons for the group. They had come up with small ball bombs that could release different types of substances such as smoke, tear gas, and adhesives to distract or deter their enemies. Some could even explode with varying degrees of blast radiuses. They were also working on a better form of communication, based off of Muggle cell phones. To help them out, Harry bought a few cell phones along with books on their operation for the 3 to study. With all of the work they were doing, they had to hire a few people to help with the shop. The new workers were only involved with the commercial side of the business, though, having no knowledge of the war inventions. Minerva continued to get Harry ready for his newts, working him a bit harder now that he was to be the next defense professor. Matthew's comments about Harry had her aiming for him to get his masteries in both subjects. She also made sure he continued to practice his elemental training, including Neville and Ginny now that she had more time with them. They weren't quite as far along as Harry, but they definitely were getting the hang of it. Ron came up with the idea that the group needed a name as well as individual code names as a way to protect their secrecy. After the effect Harry's alter ego had on Voldemort and the Death Eaters, he thought it should be something related to it. Eventually, they all agreed on the League of the Hoods, or the Hoods for short. Then, they came up with the code names. After throwing out several suggestions, they managed to give everyone a name that suited their personality. Those names were as follows: Alpha for Harry, Lioness for Minerva, Scholar for Hermione, Shifter for Tonks, Barrister for Andromeda, Monarch for Amelia, Empath for Susan, Sleuth for Hestia, Aphrodite for Fleur, Oracle for Luna, Terran for Neville, Tactician for Ron, Firecracker for Ginny, Thing 1 for Fred, Thing 2 for George, Bear for Charlie, Mystique for Samina, and Eagle for Matthew. The creation of the group name had Harry thinking about getting jackets and boots, like the ones Sirius gave him, made for the others. He went to Charlie, asking for help identifying the dragon Hyde used, which turned out to be the extremely rare Roman drake, thought to be extinct now. It was a wingless four-legged dragon, known for its stealth capabilities and white fire. After a trip to the Black Family Vault, Harry was able to discover the name and location of the person who made his jacket and boots. Her name was Jade, and she lived deep in a forest in Wales where she had a secret sanctuary for the drakes. Once Fleur took everyone's measurements, she, Harry, and Minerva went to Jade with the Hood's request. She agreed to do it after Harry showed her the black ring. An argument to convince the board was in the works as well. After much debate, the group had decided on informing them about everything that had happened at the school since Harry started. Minerva suggested they mention Dumbledore's picking of unqualified or dangerous people for the defense professor position. Tonks brought up Dumbledore's allowance of Snape to single-handedly decrease the number of qualified potion makers and its effect on any job that required a grade of E or above in potions. This included healers and aurors. Hestia also suggested that, to help convince the board they were only concerned about the safety of the students, they offered to send a contingency of aurors to patrol the castle. Even though they were busy with everything else, those in the know also spent time trying to figure out where the rest of Horcruxes were. Hestia spent a lot of her time working on this, being the most likely to figure it out due to her ability to notice even the smallest of details. She also enlisted the help of David Fletcher from the Daily Prophet. She had him track down any articles written about the Gaunt family for her to read. He agreed to help without asking why she needed them, realizing her need for secrecy. He knew she wouldn't ask him if it weren't important. He also secretly fancied her, though he tried not to show that. Hestia was aware of it, though, and planned on approaching him about it herself, if he didn't make a move on her soon. All in all, everything was moving forward. At a few minutes past 7, Harry, Minerva, and Matthew flood over to Minerva's house. No one else was coming since it would be a bit dangerous for those who weren't Animagi to be around for his first transformation. Ron and the twins protested a little, wanted to see how it would happen, but Matthew was able to convince them to wait for their turn. Ron couldn't be snuck out of the burrow for 12 hours without Mrs. Weasley noticing, and the twins decided to wait for their brother, not wanting to leave him out. Instead, they were busy planning Harry and Neville's surprise birthday party that would take place tomorrow evening. Once they reached a small clearing in the woods that surrounded Minerva's house, Matthew ran through everything that would happen one more time. Then he went to check on the potion while Minerva turned to Harry. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous, but excited." Harry's smile fell after a moment, and he looked away. "What is it?" "I just wish Sirius was here to see it." Minerva wrapped her arm around his shoulder. "I do too. He would be so proud of you for this and everything else you've been able to accomplish recently. He'd probably give me a hard time about becoming a professor, though," Harry joked after a moment, "and likely blame it on my influence." They both laughed as they thought about what Sirius's reaction to that would be. "All right, everything's set, so as soon as you're ready, Harry, we can begin," Matthew interjected. Harry took a deep breath. "Let's get started then." Minerva squeezed Harry's shoulder once before moving to sit by Matthew as he handed over the potion to him. "Does it taste as bad as it smells?" Harry asked as he got a whiff of it, the foul odor making his nose hairs cringe. "Sorry, Ace, but it's even worse," Matthew replied. But at least you only have to drink it once. As many potions as you've consumed in your life, this shouldn't bother you by now," Minerva remarked teasingly. "I mean, I know how to avoid tasting most of it, but that doesn't mean I like it," Harry countered before he pinched his nose and gulped the entire contents down. "Ugh, that was horrible. What's in that stuff?" Harry asked once he finished. "Trust me, Ace, you don't want to know," Matthew warned. Harry couldn't respond because the potion started to take effect on him. He felt like he was spinning as images flew around him, moving too fast for him to see clearly. His head felt woozy, and he couldn't tell what was up or down as the world shook around him. Then his body started to shift, his bones and muscles contorting into different shapes, though strangely enough, it wasn't painful. He felt his mind get overtaken by another presence as he had an out-of-body experience. Next thing he knew, he was looking down on himself, though instead of his normal human body, he saw a large gray wolf. It had a lightning bolt-shaped white mark over his right eye and a diagonal mark on the left side of his face, representing the scars on his face. After a moment, his conscience returned to his mind, though he still didn't feel in control of it. Matthew and Minerva had transformed into their own forms once Harry had finished, an eagle and cat respectively. Minerva made hers bigger to match Harry's size. Harry's wolf sized both of them up and sniffed at the air, assessing their threat level. When he decided they weren't foe or prey, he barked warningly before trotting off in a different direction. Matthew and Minerva followed along at a careful distance, with Matthew up high in the air. They followed him around as he got used to his new form, testing out its limits. He bounced around like a newborn cub, smelling every new plant he saw or simply the air around him. He barked at small creatures he saw, chasing after a few of them and letting the ones he caught go. He didn't stop running around until he reached the riverbank, where he stopped to take a drink. Minerva slowly approached him as non-threateningly as she could. When Harry noticed her, he turned around and faced her, hackles raised and teeth bared. He growled at her, trying to get her to back away, but she stayed put. Curious, he sniffed the air trying to get a whiff of her scent. The familiarity of it had him slowly approaching her, sniffing continuously as he tried to figure out where he knew that scent from. Once he was right in front of her, he sniffed even stronger, finally recognizing her. He butted his head against her playfully, and she did the same to him. Matthew flew down from his perch, and Harry repeated the same process until he recognized him as well. When Harry started running around the forest again, Minerva was by his side with Matthew right above them. They continued this for the rest of the 12 hours, taking breaks or short rests when needed. After a few hours, Harry gained more control over his form, no longer feeling like a passenger in his own mind. Minerva tried to teach him a few skills that both their animals shared, but mostly they played around as Harry got adjusted to his new way of movement. Harry had one of the best times of his life, as he enjoyed the feeling of pure freedom. In that forest with Minerva and Matthew, he could leave behind all of his fears, worries, and problems. It would always be a fond memory of his for as long as he lived. As the end of the 12 hours came, Minerva led Harry back to her house. By the time they reached it, all of them were feeling the exhaustion. Thankfully, they only had to wait a few minutes for Harry to change back. Well, that was fun, Harry muttered once all of them were human again. Then his legs gave out on him, and Minerva just barely managed to catch him before he fell to the floor. "Seems like it was very tiring as well," Matthew remarked. He moved to help them, and together the three of them managed to fly back to the manor. "Thank you, Matthew. I have him from here," Minerva said once they had reached the 3rd floor. Matthew gave her a curious look, but didn't argue. "All right then, you two get some rest." "You as well," Minerva replied. "Thanks for everything," Harry muttered, barely audible. Once Matthew was headed down the stairs, Minerva brought Harry to his room. She helped him in a bed and cleaned him up with a wave of her wand. Then she switched his clothes into something more comfortable for sleep. Harry was so out of it that he barely paid her actions any attention. She thought he'd gone to sleep until he spoke up. "Hey, Minerva," he called out softly. He seemed to have gained a bit more strength in order to tell her something. "Yes, Harry," she replied, moving closer to be able to hear him. "Thank you for tonight. I don't say it nearly enough, but I really appreciate everything you've done for me." "You're welcome, Harry." She was about to leave but saw the hesitation on his face, making her realize he wanted to say something else. "Whatever it is, Harry, You know you can tell me. Well, it's just that my transformation has me feeling a bit strange. Will you stay? Just for tonight. What he didn't say is that his feelings for her were really intense at the moment, and he didn't want to be apart from her. Even while he slept, when she didn't respond for a while, Harry thought he'd overstepped his bounds and tried to fix it. Just as he started to apologize, Minerva held up her hand to stop him. I'll stay for the night. Harry was surprised she agreed, but didn't question it, worried she would change her mind. Thank you. Minerva left to get ready for bed. Harry was asleep by the time she returned, so she quietly slipped under the covers and moved until she was in her usual starting position. As she ran her fingers through his hair, she couldn't help but chastise herself for giving in to her desires. It's worth it, though, she thought as drifted off. The next day, he and Minerva woke up in an intimate position, as was typical when they slept together. This time, they tried not to make a big deal about it, however, and were able to untangle themselves with minimal embarrassment. Minerva then wished him happy birthday before going to her room. Once both of them had gone to their bathrooms and performed their daily hygiene rituals, Minerva was quick to lay down the law for the day. He was not allowed to use any magic whatsoever for the entire day. Neither was he allowed to exercise or lift anything heavy. Harry tried to argue against it at first, but it was half-hearted since he was still feeling the exhaustion from last night. Then she had Dobby bring him breakfast in bed before relegating him to his room until dinner time. Samina arrived shortly after Harry finished eating, deciding to keep him company as the others finished up the preparations for his surprise birthday dinner. Well, how does it feel to officially be an Animagus? Samina asked as she sat down in a chair beside his bed. Harry smiled in remembrance of last night. Brilliant, though it'll be even better when I can actually use it. Minerva pretty much has me on bloody lockdown for the day. I'm sure she's only doing it to keep you safe. I know, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Harry shook his head before changing the subject. Anyway, how did everything go on your search? It went very well, if I do say so myself. Managed to find everything on my list, and I've already started on all of the potions. Also decided where to take you to collect the unicorn blood. Where? Harry asked, curiosity piqued. There's a small forest near the Lake of Virtue in Greece, where I had to get the water for the ritual from. It has a good-sized herd of them there. I get to go out of the country then? Good thing I have a passport. You've never traveled before? Harry shook his head. Never really had any time or the ability to do so. But now I do. How will we be getting there? Well, since you have a passport, I think we should fly to Greece and then apparate to the forest. We could use a port key, but where is the fun in that? Samina had a mischievous smirk on her lips. I've always wanted to get on a plane, so that sounds good to me. I thought you might like that. So, tell me what you all have been up to since I left. Harry gave her a detailed account of everything that had occurred while she was gone. By the time he was finished, Samina could only shake her head at the foolishness of Dumbledore. If he really thought he could stand between Minnie and someone she cares about, then he never knew her at all. Samina exclaimed before calming down. As for being the potions professor, I suppose I can stick around for a school year. She'll have to find someone else afterward, though. I don't think she expected you to stay for any longer than that, Harry agreed. The two of them talked for a little while longer until Creature brought Harry his lunch. Throughout the rest of the day until dinner time, the others took turns keeping him company, so he didn't feel alone. When it was their turn, Ron and the twins asked him all kinds of questions about his transformation. Harry's answers had them eagerly waiting for their turn to do it, and they spent time trying to guess what animal they would become. Hermione, Ginny, and Tonks also asked about his Animagus form, with Hermione writing everything he said down, for research purposes, of course. Luna, meanwhile, gave him a cryptic message about the right time fast approaching, something Harry was still too out of it to try and figure out at the moment. The rest simply came to talk to him about normal topics, trying to keep his mood upbeat. When it was finally time for dinner and the party to start, Minerva collected him from upstairs. As they opened the door to the kitchen, everyone yelled happy birthday, causing Harry to stumble. He would have fallen down if it weren't for Minerva holding on to him. Every member of the Hoods was gathered around the table, which was full of food and presents. Blimey, you guys didn't have to do all of this for me, Harry remarked. Of course, we did, mate. It's your birthday, Ron exclaimed. Something that's supposed to be celebrated, Ginny added. What about Neville's birthday? His was yesterday, Harry protested. That's why I'm sitting here, Neville said from his spot at the foot of the table. He'd spent most of the day with his parents and grandmother at the hospital wing and had only arrived at the manor a few minutes ago, Did you really think all of these presents were for you, mate? He added jokingly. Just sit down and enjoy it already, and stop making things so difficult. Tonks cut in. Minerva led Harry to the seat at the head of the table, opposite of Neville. Hermione, who was sitting to his left, put a plate of food in front of him, cutting off any more protests from him. After that, they ate, laughed, and shared stories. No one talked about Voldemort, Dumbledore, or any of their other problems. Instead, they used this time as a much-needed break from the chaos of the war. Once they finished eating, the presents were passed out to the two guests of honor. Neville's gifts were mostly herbology-related, including a rare plant from Samina found during her recent trip. Harry, who had remembered Neville's birthday, but not his own, gave him a rare book on magical plants he'd found in his vault. Neville also got items that would help him in the war, such as an Auror Grade wand holster. Both wizards received an assortment of treats, as well as a hand-stitched sweater from Molly and Arthur. Harry's gift included a request to meet with him and Minerva, something he planned on accepting once he talked to the witch in question about it. Harry's gifts were an assortment of things, since he was a bit harder to shop for. He got books, joke items from the twins, a magic-infused dagger from Matthew, as well as a few other things. Andromeda, Amelia, Tonks, and Fleur had collaborated to have an outfit for the Wizengamot session made for him. It included a pair of black pants, a long-sleeve black button-up, a silver sweater vest with a black family insignia, and formal black boots to go with it. Instead of a robe, since they were aware of his distaste of those, they had a black cape made with the insignia on the back of it in silver. The whole outfit was formal, but still loose enough for him to be able to fight in. His favorite gift, however, was from Minerva. She gave him a locket that depicted a dog, a stag, and a lily in honor of his parents and godfather. On the inside was a picture of his parents and Sirius with Lily holding him as a baby. She'd found it in her stuff a while ago and thought he would appreciate it. When Harry finished examining it, he could only nod in gratitude, a single tear falling down his face. Soon after that, Harry and Neville thanked everyone for the party and the gifts. Then they all dispersed for the evening. As Harry and Minerva got to their floor and were about to go to their own rooms, Harry pulled her into a tight hug. "Thank you, Minerva. This is the best gift I've ever gotten," he whispered into her ear. "You're welcome, Harry. I just wish there was a way to give you more time with them," she replied. They stayed in that embrace for a few moments longer before reluctantly separating to their own rooms for the night. Harry got increasingly nervous as the day of the Wizengamot session got closer and closer. By the time it was Monday, Harry had convinced himself that he would mess everything up. After their training session in the morning, Hermione pulled him to the side to try and calm him down. "Honestly, Harry, you're getting yourself all riled up for nothing you know. You're going to do fine," Hermione scolded lightly. "What if forget what to say, or say the wrong thing, and mess everything up, though?" Harry retorted. "Harry, you're going to be fine. Even if you do forget what to say, you know how to improvise." But nothing, Harry," Hermione said sharply before softening her voice. "You can do this. Everyone believes in you, so it's time you start believing in yourself." "She's right, you know," Amelia cut in, having overheard their conversation. "All you have to do is announce your lordship, nominate Andy as your proxy, and call for a vote of no confidence." "But what if I'm not able to convince enough people to vote on our side?" Harry asked. "Trust me when I say this, Harry. That won't be hard for you to do. You have a natural charisma and charm despite what you may think," Amelia explained. Harry looked at her skeptically. "How do you know that? You managed to get all of us on your side, didn't you?" "We're all here because we believe in you and your ability to end this war," Amelia stated. "Plus, most of the public are on your side anyway after the Department of Mysteries incident. See, all you have to do is be yourself, and everything will work out, so stop overthinking things. That's what usually gets you into trouble," Hermione declared. Harry ran his hand through his hair, sheepishly, seeing the truth in their words. "Thanks for calming me down." "That's what I'm here for," Hermione replied. "Me as well," Amelia added. Crisis averted. Everyone returned to the manor to eat breakfast before those who had to go to the session went to get ready. Only Harry, Andromeda, Amelia, Tonks, and Hestia were going, with the latter two serving as guards for Harry and Amelia respectively. As Harry was trying to figure out how to put on his tie without magic, someone knocked on his door. "Come in," he called out distractedly as he struggled. Minerva stepped inside and chuckled lightly at his efforts. "Let me," she said as she moved toward him. She effortlessly tied it into a Windsor knot before straightening out his vest and smoothing his collar. She also straightened out his locket, secretly happy to see him wearing it. Then she placed glamour charms on him to disguise his face. When she tried to hide his newest scar, he stopped her, saying he didn't want to hide it anymore. "You do realize you could have tied that with magic," Minerva remarked once she was done. Harry shrugged. "I wanted to try it the Muggle way for once. Didn't realize it was so bloody difficult, though." "Are you ready then?" she asked, a touch of concern in her tone. He smiled reassuringly at her. "I am now, after Hermione and Amelia calmed me down and made me realize I was overthinking everything." She shook her head at him. "Well, at least you're calm now, though you really need to get out of that habit." "I'll try. Now go have fun overturning our government." Harry smirked and saluted her. "Yes, ma'am." Ushim. After going over the plan once more, the group of 5 operated outside of the ministry before separating into 2 groups, so no one could guess that something was up. Amelia and Hestia went one way while Harry, Tonks, and Andromeda went another. No one paid the trio any attention as they moved through the ministry, since Harry was unrecognizable. They were able to make it outside of the atrium where the session would be held, without any delay. Andromeda led them to office outside of the Black family seating area, locking the door behind them. Then all they could do was wait until everything started. Once the session was called into order by Dumbledore, who had reclaimed his position as Chief Warlock, the trio slipped into the atrium proper. Harry sat down in the head chair with Andromeda and Tonks sitting beside him. They glanced at the full reporter section, making eye contact with David, who had been asked by Hestia to be in attendance for the day. While she hadn't told him exactly what would happen, she had hinted that it would be something he didn't want to miss. "Before we get into regular business, does anyone have a matter they'd like to bring to court's attention?" Dumbledore stated once he finished the official opening. Harry stood up at that and took a deep, cleansing breath. "I am announcing my ascension to the Black family lordship," he stated firmly. This caused much murmuring to break out throughout the atrium. Those who had been talked to by Andromeda and Amelia gazed at him curiously, realizing this likely was part of the surprise the witches had mentioned. "Who are you to claim that position?" Lord Knott shouted derisively. Harry turned towards the man calmly, his face indifferent. "I am the chosen heir and godson of Sirius Orion Black, the previous Lord Black." Black was stripped of that position when he was sent to Azkaban. Lord Malfoy held that seat since then, and it is supposed to go to his heir. Another challenged. "You are mistaken. My godfather may have been illegally imprisoned, but as he was never formally convicted, the lordship still belonged to him. He named me his heir in his will. Therefore I am Lord Black," Harry corrected, flashing his ring to prove his point. Before anyone else could protest, Dumbledore banged his gavel, silencing the room after a moment. "As I was a witness to Sirius Black's will, I can confirm Mr. Potter's claim. He is the rightful Lord Black, and to be afforded all rights, responsibilities, and privileges, so forth." The trio could just barely hear the hint of bitterness in Dumbledore's tone, and they smirked smugly at it. After all, they had just backed him into a corner. If he had denied Harry's claim, they could show the copy of the will they had brought with them as proof. This would bring him under close scrutiny, since it clearly shows that Dumbledore was mentioned in the will and therefore had to have been present at the reading of it. "Thank you, Chief Warlock," Harry stated, bowing his head in acknowledgement as he tried to keep his enjoyment of Dumbledore's dilemma out of his voice. "I am honored to be here among all of you and to have the chance to serve in this great body. However, I'm still a student of Hogwarts and with much to learn about the work and procedures of the Wizengamot and my responsibilities as Lord Black. Therefore, after this meeting, Andromeda Tonks will serve as my proxy until I am better prepared to handle my duties." Andromeda stood up with Harry and nodded to the assembly. "Thank you, Lord Black. I will endeavor to perform my duties as your proxy in a way that you approve of for as long as you need me to do so." "Very well. Does anyone else have a matter they'd like to discuss?" Dumbledore asked as Andromeda sat down. Harry, however, was still standing, something Dumbledore picked up on once he finished his question. "Is there something else you'd like to say, Lord Black?" "Yes, Chief Warlock," Harry began. In light of the acknowledgement that Voldemort, Harry ignored the gasps of shock, is alive, it comes to my attention that a change in ministry leadership is in order. To fight this war effectively, We need someone with better experience, who is more capable of leading this country to victory. Fudge jumped to his feet indignantly at Harry's words. I have been the minister of this country for the past 7 years. I have done a great job and have the necessary experience to lead this war. He insisted. A great job? Harry mocked. You, who has continuously taken resources from other departments to fuel your selfish desires. You, who has taken funding from the Aura department and assigned them to unimportant tasks. You, who thought it was a good idea to have dementors at a school full of children, despite the fact that the escapee you were chasing had already managed to slip past them before. You, who arrested the innocent gamekeeper of Hogwarts during the Chamber of Secrets debacle instead of having the Aurors investigate the matter, wanted to look like you were doing something instead of actually doing something. You, who allowed yourself to be led and bribed by a man who now resides in Azkaban. What good have you done for this country? What positive changes have you made? Because of you, other countries look down on us and have very little faith that we'll be able to handle Voldemort or his death. Eaters, you are a mere child and know nothing about intricacies of leading a country. Harry scoffed at Fudge dismissively. This mere child was unafraid to accept the fact that Voldemort was alive. This mere child has stood in front of Voldemort and come out alive more than once. Seeing Fudge's continuous flinching as he said Voldemort name had Harry shaking his head in disgust. And this mere child can say and hear the name Voldemort without cowering in fear. Unlike you. So, forgive me for doubting your ability to run this country effectively during a time of peace, let alone in a time of war. As Fudge began to splutter insults, Harry ignored the man and turned his attention to Dumbledore. As I was saying, Chief Warlock, I would like to call a vote on removing the current minister from office and installing another. Does anyone second that motion? Dumbledore asked hesitantly. The atrium was quiet for a moment before a wizard stood up. I, Lord Davis, second the motion. Harry nodded to him, receiving one in return. So ordered, Dumbledore replied. He called for the vote and had the secretary count them, though that was only a formality. Those in favor far outnumbered those against. The motion to remove the current minister from his position is passed. Minister Fudge, I am afraid it is time for you to step down. Being prepared for his reaction, Amelia had stationed some of her Aurors near where Fudge was sitting. Now they moved to drag the man out, holding him tightly as he struggled to get away. Fudge yelled the entire time, and his screams weren't silenced until the doors were shut behind him. Now we need to vote on our next Minister of Magic. Those who would like to nominate someone may begin now, Dumbledore stated. This was followed by several names being thrown out around the atrium. When names were put forward, many glanced toward Harry to see if he would second them, trying to gauge who he would support. He sat back calmly, though, giving no emotions as the names were called. Eventually a few managed to get seconded. Lord Knott was the first to successfully get nominated. Amos Diggory was next. 2 others Harry didn't know were picked as well. Those who called for them all gave short speeches, touting their supposed worthiness for the position. Still, Harry was quiet, seeming almost disinterested in the process, making some question why he called for the vote in the first place. They expected him to nominate someone personally, but he wasn't concerned with their expectations. He was a bit nervous that no one would nominate Amelia, but Andromeda calmed him down by placing her hand on his shoulder and whispering for him to be patient. Near the end of the nomination period, Lord Greengrass stood up and cleared his throat. I nominate Madame Amelia Bones for Minister of Magic. She was an exemplary and honorable student during her time at Hogwarts, serving as a prefect for the House of Hufflepuff. Since she joined the Aurors, she has worked tirelessly to protect and defend our country. During the First War, she made a name for herself as a fierce and brave warrior, being instrumental in many of our victories after she graduated school. She rose through the Aura ranks quickly on her own merits and hard work, never asking for any handouts. As the head of our Department of Magical Law Enforcement, she has reformed that department to make it run more effectively and efficiently, despite the previous minister's substantial cuts to her department. I am more than confident that as Minister of Magic, she would be able to not only win this war, but change our country into a better place, making it an example that others would want to follow. Those who'd been nominated became increasingly nervous as Lord Greengrass spoke. But it was Harry's next words that nailed the coffin into their dreams of becoming the Minister of Magic. I, Lord Black, second that nomination. Amelia fixed a slightly surprised expression on her face as she stood and accepted the nomination. Like the first one, this vote was merely a formality as Amelia won overwhelmingly with Harry's support. Most didn't want to go against, the man who even Voldemort couldn't defeat. Then Amelia stood to give a few words. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to lead our country. I promise to earn the faith and trust you have shown me today by upholding the laws of our country and making it a safer place. My first action as your Minister of Magic will be to officially declare war against Voldemort and his Death Eaters. They are to be classified as terrorists, and any who are found working with them will be treated as traitors against our country. Because of this, I will immediately increase the funding for the Aura Department to give them the tools and equipment they need to fight this war properly. My former department will also be left in the capable hands of Rufus Scrimgeour, who I'm sure will do an exemplary job running it. I will do everything in my power to save this country from the tyranny of Voldemort, but I can't do it alone. She turned to look directly at the reporter section, her gaze focused on David and his cameraman. I want this message to be sent out as soon as possible. Those who want to be able to fight back against our enemies, I invite you to come join the Aura Department. Learn how to defend not only yourselves, but your family and friends as well. Our enemies may seem strong, but together we can be even stronger. To finish, she turned back to face the atrium at large. I know many of you have questions, but they will have to be asked at the press conference I will hold tomorrow. Right now, I need to get to work to get our ministry back on track. Amelia, guarded by Hestia and another Auror, exited the room after that, leaving the atrium buzzing with noise. Harry, Tonks, and Andromeda also slipped out before too many could notice him. Dumbledore did notice, however, and he was left trying to figure out what was going on. Unfortunately for him, he wouldn't find out until it was too late. Early that evening, the Hoods gave a toast to their new Minister of Magic and the success of their plan. League of Hoods members: Harry, Alpha; Minerva, Lioness Hermione; Scholar Tonks, Shifter; Andromeda, Barrister Amelia; Monarch, Estia, Esleus Fleur; Aphrodite Luna, Oracle; Ron, Tactician; Neville, Terran means Earth; Fred, Thing 1; George, Thing 2; Ginny, Firecracker, Charlie Bear; Samina, Mystique, Matthew, Eagle. Chapter 14, and this is the second of two updates. This one has a bit of action in it, so I hope it was written well enough. Chapter 14. The day after Amelia was named Minister of Magic, Harry and Minerva went to the Burrow for lunch to talk with Molly and Arthur. When they arrived, the couple was waiting for them in the kitchen, a meal set out on the table. Molly got up and pulled Harry into a tight hug, one that he received gratefully. As she pulled back, he saw the tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, we didn't do more to help you. We should have taken you in as soon we realized those people weren't taking proper care of you, she said, pain and regret heard clearly in her voice. It's not your fault, Mrs. Weasley, and there wasn't much you could do, he replied. Besides, I know how hard you tried to convince Dumbledore to get me out of there earlier every single summer, but he didn't listen. That's on him, not you. When did you get so wise all of a sudden? She asked jokingly, wiping the tears from her face. Harry laughed. I spent too much time around Minerva. Yes, she tends to have that effect on people. She laughed with him as they walked over to the table to sit down. Minerva and Arthur greeted Molly and Harry respectively once they reached the table before all four of them sat down to eat. I'm sure you can already guess, but we've spent quite a bit of time thinking and have come to the realization that Dumbledore does not have your best interests at heart, Harry. He treats you like a weapon instead of a person, and I will no longer sit by and let it happen, Molly said after a moment of silence. Me either, Arthur confirmed. His obsessive need to control you is concerning. In fact, he has an obsessive need to control this war and how it proceeds. He doesn't seem to be fighting this war effectively, and his actions in the last one failed to prevent more innocent lives from being lost. I lost two of my brothers during the last war, and now I can't help but think that Dumbledore could have prevented that, Molly added. So whatever you two have planned, we will no longer support that man. Thank you, Harry and Minerva replied gratefully. They looked at each other before beginning to tell Arthur and Molly about what they had been working on. Harry made sure to accept responsibility for her children, hiding the fact that they had been training but they were quick to forgive him. Though neither wanted any of their children to have to fight in the war, they realized they wouldn't be able to stop them from supporting Harry, not after everything he'd done for their family. At least they were being taught by some of the best witches and wizards in the country. After making sure both of them knew occlumency, they informed them about the Horcruxes and Operation Tomb. Molly cried hard when she figured out that Dumbledore had planned on using Harry as a sacrifice, pulling him into another tight hug. "I can't believe he tried to throw your life away like that. As if it means nothing," Molly cried. "And to think you spent almost your whole life with a piece of that monster inside of you, and he did nothing to get rid of it," Arthur said, his tone icy. "I was upset as well when I became aware of that," Minerva remarked, a hint of anger in her tone. "At least now I have a way to get it out of me," Harry said placatingly. "Yes, thanks to Samina," Minerva said. "Is there anything we can do to help at the moment?" Molly asked once she calmed down some. "Amelia asked if you would meet with her today about helping her in the ministry, Arthur," Minerva noted, having been told to pass the message earlier today. "And you can come over to the manor anytime, Mrs. Weasley." "I'm sure there's plenty you can help us with there," Harry suggested. "In fact, Charlie's told me that you're really good at healing magic. We already have Poppy helping us, but we could always use more help. And Susan seems to have an affinity for it as well. You could teach her what you know." Both agreed to their suggestions, grateful to have something useful to do. Harry and Minerva made sure to tell them not to quit the order until after Dumbledore was ousted as headmaster before they left. The Hoods had decided it was best for all still in the order, except Tonks, to wait until then to resign to avoid rousing any more suspicion than necessary. Tonks quit ahead of them since Dumbledore had already seen her with Harry at the Wizengamot meeting. She had been quite satisfied after sending off the letter with her resignation from the order to him. While Harry and Minerva had their meeting, Fleur was having a long overdue talk with Bill. She met with him for lunch in a Muggle restaurant in the middle of London. They were getting their food to go so they could talk somewhere private. Once they had both given their orders, Fleur broached the subject they'd been avoiding for the past few weeks. "Bill, there is something I need to tell you, and I ask that you give me a chance to explain before you make any decisions," she said. "If you're trying to tell me you want to see other people, please don't. I promise I'll talk to my mother and get her to stop bad-mouthing you and start respecting you. I've even gotten us an apartment where we can live instead to give us some privacy," Bill pleaded. When she'd first moved out of the borough, he'd thought she needed some time to herself. But after a few weeks went by and she hadn't returned, he started to get worried that she was going to leave him. They had seen each other, of course, but not as much as they used to. "That is not what this is about," she stated. "Zuff, we do need to have a talk with your mother about her problems with me. I need to apologize to her for my behavior as well." "It's not? Then what is this about? Why haven't you come back yet? And where have you been staying?" Bill asked suspiciously. There was a pause in their conversation as they received their food. Bill led them to a secluded area in the nearby park, warding it off before they sat down. Fleur had spread the blanket out for them to sit on, their food placed in between them as they sat across from each other. She took a deep breath before she began explaining her problems with Dumbledore and Tonks' proposition to her. Then she told him about Harry's talk with her and the others and her decision to help him. Remembering Tonks' warning, she didn't talk about any of their plans just yet, waiting until she knew his reaction first. She also didn't mention any of the others that were at the meeting or part of the Hoods by name. Zenny offered a room in his manor, so I decided to stay there, Fleur concluded. "I didn't mean to stay so long, but I've been very busy, helping him and with work." Bill sat back, unsure about what to do. He didn't understand why she had a problem with the headmaster. After all, he was the leader of the Light and the one who stopped Grindelwald. He wasn't perfect, but he wouldn't intentionally hurt anyone. If Bill was honest with himself, he believed Harry was more of a problem than anyone else. After an uncomfortable silence, he finally spoke up. "You really believe him about Dumbledore and everything?" Fleur replied back firmly and without hesitation. "I do. I need time to think about this." He paused for a moment. "What else aren't you telling me?" "I can't tell you until you make your decision. They are sensitive matters, I'm afraid." "You aren't doing anything dangerous, are you?" Fleur gave him a strange look. "It is a war, Bill. Danger is unavoidable, but that doesn't mean you have to fight in it. You didn't have this problem when I was part of the Order? Because Dumbledore was in charge then. What is that supposed to mean?" Fleur's tone was dangerous, but Bill ignored the warning sign. "I'm just saying you should be careful. Harry has a habit of getting people hurt or killed. Plus, he's still a kid with no real experience leading anyone. He doesn't know what he's doing. How could you say that after he saved your sister and your phasers' lives? Because he also put Ron in danger several times. Ron chose to help him because they are friends. And Harry never went looking for trouble. He was always dragged into it. He's a trouble magnet, and I don't trust him to keep you safe. I will not abandon him. Not after he saved my sister's life without any regard to his safety. Not when he was the first person outside of my family to see me for who I am and not as the stereotypes of my race. He is my friend. What about me? I see you that way. And so what he helped your sister. She was never really in trouble anyway. Dumbledore made sure of that. Dumbledore did not. Fleur leapt from to her feet in fury. Your precious Dumbledore forgot that the Villa and the Mere people have a treaty banning us from entering each of theirs territory. During that task, they sabotaged me with the Grindylows and would have killed Gabby if Harry hadn't decided to save her too. Bill stood up as well. Dumbledore wouldn't have done that. Just like he didn't do anything to Harry. Yes, he did. You were just blind to see it. The two of them stood glaring at each other for several moments, too angry to talk. Then, Bill gave her a look of disappointment and shook his head at her. I thought you were better than that, but I see I was wrong. You're just as enamored with Potter as everyone else is. I trust Harry because he has earned it from me. It is you who refuses to see Dumbledore for who he really is. And I cannot be with someone who supports that man. Not after these things he's done to Harry in the name of the greater good. Then go. You probably just want to be with him anyway, but you're too afraid to admit it. I hope he doesn't get bored with you too soon. Fleur stepped back in horror. I thought you saw past the stereotypes, but I guess I was wrong as well. Goodbye, William. Then she waved her wand, dispelling the wards around them, and walked away, leaving an angry wizard behind. Tears fell down her face as she operated away. When Harry, who was in the living room alone for once, saw Fleur's face as she walked into the door, he knew her talk hadn't gone well. He got up and met her in the hallway, trying to think of something to say to try and comfort her. He didn't get a chance, though, because she threw herself into his arms before he could get out a word. He rubbed her back as she sobbed uncontrollably. They stood there for several minutes until Fleur had calmed down enough to speak. I'm sorry, Harry, Fleur said as she pulled away, trying to wipe her face. Don't be, Harry replied as he conjured a handkerchief for her, which she accepted gratefully. I'm your friend. I'm supposed to help you when you're in distress. Thank you. Fleur finished wiping her face. What did he say? Harry asked after giving her a few moments to regain her composure. That he believes Dumbledore can do no wrong and that you're reckless and get people into trouble, or worse. When Fleur saw Harry's head drop a bit, she placed her finger under his chin to lift it back up. He is wrong, Harry. You have spent much of your life trying to help people. The chaos that you get into is because of the actions or inactions of others, not you. Even when you do run towards trouble, it is only because you feel like you have no choice and couldn't live with yourself if you did nothing. Harry gave a small chuckle. You witches are determined to stop me from brooding, aren't you? Yes, we are. Fleur smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. Harry picked up on that. What else did he say? He got angry after I defended you and implied that the only reason I am supporting you is because I want to be with you. Then he said, and I quote, I hope he doesn't get bored with you too soon, so I left him. I'm so sorry he said that to you. If he wasn't a Weasley, I'd go hex him. Sadly, I can't, but I can promise that you'll always have a place here, no matter what. I stick up for my friends, even when it's difficult. Thank you, Harry. That is why I will support you, no matter what anyone else says. After Fleur's argument with Bill, Molly and Arthur tried to sit their son down and convince him of Dumbledore's many faults. He wouldn't listen to them, however, insisting that they were the ones who were blind to Harry's faults. In his mind, a man who had done so much for him and his family couldn't possibly have committed the actions they claimed he did, especially not when Dumbledore was the one who helped him realize his dream to become a curse breaker by getting him several coveted opportunities to train under some of the greats. In the field, when he threatened to tell Dumbledore about their perceived betrayal, Arthur realized how much Dumbledore had groomed Bill to be his blind follower. He was forced to wipe the memory of the conversation from Bill's mind to preserve their secret. Molly's heart was broken at losing another son, but but she found comfort in being able to teach Susan about healing magic and helping the Hoods in general. It gave her a sense of purpose beyond anything she'd ever felt with the Order, reinforcing the belief that she and her family had made the right decision. Apologizing to Fleur for her harsh judgment based on unfair prejudices made her feel better too, especially since the witch apologized for her brash attitude in return. Their relationship was much better now that they'd gotten over their misunderstandings and found that they actually enjoyed being in each other's company. Molly also kept busy with healing up any injuries the group sustained during training and helping Winky and Topsy in the kitchen whenever they let her. The three of them came to an agreement that Molly was allowed to make lunch every day and dinner on Sundays. She was also allowed to help with the cooking on any celebrations or other special occasions. All of the Weasleys, except Percy of course, apologized for Bill's words and actions, letting Fleur know that they didn't share his viewpoint. This was especially meaningful to her coming from Ginny, who had warmed up to the villa over the past few weeks. The rest of the Hoods offered their support as well. George was especially kind to her, going out of his way to try and make her laugh as often as he could without overdoing it. Fleur appreciated all of their actions, feeling a bit better about the situation because of it. Arthur was kept busy as well. When he met with Amelia, she offered to place him in charge of a special task force she was creating. Its job would be to minimize the impact the war had on the Muggle world and to prevent the magical world's discovery. They would be in charge of cleaning and fixing up any damage caused by magical fights. They would have people out in the country monitoring things on the ground to give early warning of an attack in the Muggle world. Whenever the Aurors went on a planned attack, the task force would come along to minimize the damage and protect any potential witnesses, keeping them from noticing anything if possible, and erasing the memories of those who saw anything. They would also help coordinate with the Muggle leaders who knew about the magical world, keeping them informed about what was going on, while the leaders would let them know of any issues or attacks suspected to be caused by magic. With Harry's help, Arthur was much more knowledgeable about the Muggle world and its many intricacies, making him well-suited for the job. All of the work he had to do helped keep his mind from dwelling on his eldest son's betrayal of their family, though he was still very upset by it. Both Molly and Arthur were fully accepted into the ranks of the Hoods, and their measurements were sent to Jade so they could get their own uniform made. The others had already received theirs a few days ago, their code names being added to them by Fleur for a small personal touch. Everyone was satisfied with them, liking how they fit each of them the way they wanted them to. Even Harry's had gotten an alteration, so it better fit his frame. On Friday of that same week, a breakthrough in the search for the Horcruxes was made. Hestia was able to discover the last known address of the Gaunt family, using the old articles and records David had provided her. She told those in the know about it, and they all agreed it was a likely hiding place. So, on Saturday evening, Harry, Minerva, Hestia, Andromeda, Amelia, Tonks, and Samina apparat at the end of the street where the Gaunt shack was located. They approached slowly, with Hestia and Samina activating their magical reader and aura reader abilities respectively. The others continuously scanned their surroundings to look out for any sign of someone being there. Once they reached the ward line, Hestia held up her hand to stop them. "If there isn't a Horcrux hiding here, then I'm not a witch. He has this place warded up tightly. Will you be able to disassemble it?" Harry asked. "I could, but that might alert Riddle to our presence since I'm not sure how connected he is to them," Hestia replied. "You're going to create a hole in the wards then?" Samina guessed. Hestia nodded. "I am, but it will take me a bit to do so. If you think it's the best way to go forward, then take all of the time you need," Amelia said, the others agreeing with her. They all stood waiting and keeping guard as Hestia worked. It took her about 20 minutes to finish, but when she was done, she had a sizable hole in the wards that extended all the way to the front door. "All right, we'll need to go in single file, but we can get in now," Hestia announced. They moved forward, with Harry right behind Hestia and Andromeda bringing up the rear. Their line was tight, as everyone made sure to follow the exact steps of the person in front of them. When they reached the door, Hestia scanned over it for any spells, finding none. She only had to push on it lightly for it to swing open. "Guess he didn't see any need to lock his door," Harry remarked sarcastically as they walked inside, causing Tonks to snort. "It's because he had too much faith in the ward's ability to keep everyone out, Samina noted. He likely has protections over the area hiding the Horcrux, though, Minerva warned. Do you see anything? Amelia asked Hestia. Hestia scanned over the room with her ability, locking onto a spot under the floorboard in the far left corner. There's a high concentration of dark magic in that area. There's also a strange ward over it, but I'm not sure what it does exactly. She walked closer to get a better look, the others following behind her. I think it's some type of persuasion or alluring ward. Samina cautiously waved her wand over the area, coming to the same conclusion as Hestia. I believe you are right. We must be very careful when opening it. If anyone starts to get any foreign or strange thoughts, back away as quickly as you can. Once everyone voiced their agreement, Hestia began dismantling the wards she could while Harry pried open the floorboard with a transfigured crowbar. Inside was a small black box, like those used for jewelry. Cautiously, Hestia spelled open the lid, revealing the Gaunt family ring inside. They didn't have a chance to focus much attention on it, however, as they all were struck by a strong pulling sensation emanating from the ring. They fought hard to ignore it, but then it started whispering in their ears, promising them anything they desired. It preyed on their hidden fears and dreams, swearing that the ring would give them the power to overcome or achieve them. They tried to step back to escape the mental assault, but it was hard to do so, their feet uncooperative and heavy as stone. We have to get the ring into the box, Andromeda shouted, referring to the magic sealing box Samina had given them to hold the Horcruxes in. Easier said than done, Tonks complained. Give it to me, Harry commanded clearly after a moment. Minerva saw the determination in his eyes. He can do it, Samina. Give him the box. Samina did as she asked without question. Be careful not to touch it with your hands, Hestia warned. Harry nodded in acknowledgement, conjuring a thick black cloth for protection. Then he released a deep breath before moving toward the ring. He took small steps to fight against the powerful urge to run forward. He tried to close off his mind from the whisperings as much as possible, ignoring the temptation they provided. When he was only a foot away, he was hit by a powerful wave of the ward's magic, and the urgent whispers turned into screams. It was impossible to ignore them, and Harry's knees buckled at their intensity. Images of him conquering Dumbledore and Voldemort began to flood his mind. Then they shifted, showing him with Minerva, together, both looking happier than he'd ever seen either of them. All the while, the screams told him that only the ring would help him achieve it. When he felt he couldn't take it anymore, the voice inside of him, which sounded just like Minerva, reminded him who he was and what he was capable of. This gave him the strength to fight back. No, I don't need or want your help, he shouted as he reached out for the ring. Once he had it securely wrapped in the cloth, he placed it in the box and closed the lid firmly, locking it away. Immediately, the dark, overbearing presence was gone, and everyone slumped down to the ground in relief. Well, that was horrible, Tonks remarked after they'd all caught their breath. Good job, Harry, Hestia complimented. This was voiced by the others in quick succession. 4 found. 3 more to go, Harry declared. On Monday the 12th, Harry, Minerva, and Tonks, who was his guard for the day, left right after breakfast to go to the ICW headquarters. Harry had been very nervous about his newts during their morning workouts, but the group as a whole were able to calm him down and reassure him that he was more than capable to pass the tests. Luna's advice to just calm down and be yourself and you'll be fine was especially helpful due to her seer abilities. Now he walked with a quiet confidence, ready to show all of the hard work he and Minerva had done in preparation for this. They were greeted at the testing office by a man named Rupert Smith, Amelia's contact whom she had set up the appointment with. Welcome, Mr. Potter, Professor McGonagall, and Auror Tonks, Rupert greeted once he took them back to his office, getting greetings in return. Thank you for setting this up anonymously for me, Harry said as he and the witches sat down in the chairs across from. You're welcome, Mr. Potter, but it was no trouble at all. Amelia is a good friend of mine, and I can definitely understand your need for secrecy, Rupert replied. Madame Bones asked me to send her regards. She wished she could have come, but being Minister of Magic has her very busy, Tonks stated. Yes, I can only imagine the mess Fudge left for her to clean up, Rupert joked. I believe calling it a mess is an understatement, Minerva remarked. Indeed, it is, Rupert agreed. Now, are you ready to go, Mr. Potter? Please call me Harry, and yes, I'm as ready as I can be thanks to. Professor McGonagall, Harry answered. You definitely got lucky getting the internationally famous Mistress of Transfiguration as your mentor. One who I know is extremely talented in not only that field, but defense and charms as well, with a mastery in the former, Rupert acknowledged admiringly. Thank you, Rupert. But Harry's talents lie more in his own innate ability. I was simply his guide, Minerva said humbly. Then he had an excellent guide, Rupert conceded. As for the tests, I thought it'd be best if we do written sections for both first and the practical sections after lunch. I will be proctoring the written ones, but the practical ones will be proctored by two others. They have both taken oaths, though, so your secrecy will not be compromised. Sounds good to me, Harry agreed. Then let's get started, Rupert declared. He led Harry to a small room with a few desks to sit at. Minerva and Tonks had to sit in the waiting room, as they weren't allowed in the testing room for the written sections, though Rupert promised to let them watch the practical sections with him. Before we begin, I have one question. Where did you get that scar on your head from? Rupert asked, referring to his most recent one. Harry responded in a secretive tone, though they were the only ones in the room. This obviously needs to stay between us for now, but let's just say I had a run-in with an infamous werewolf who is no longer alive. It was probably more due to luck than anything, though. Rupert looked at Harry in shock, knowing exactly who he was referring to, having seen the report of Greyback's death in the papers. Now I'm even more excited to see what you can do during the practical tests. Getting over his shock quickly, he focused his attention back on the current exam. He explained the instructions and rules to Harry before handing out the first test and the other materials he would need. Harry took the Transfiguration 1 first and the Dada 1 second, with a 15-minute break in between. He took his time answering the questions, making his responses as thorough as possible. Some of the questions were a bit difficult to understand since theory wasn't always his strong suit, but Minerva's preparation helped him to figure out what the questions were ultimately asking. During his break, he took time to organize and calm his thoughts, focusing only on the next test. When he was finally finished with both, Rupert took them to a restaurant nearby the office to avoid anyone recognizing them in the building's crowded lunchroom. There Harry had a light, but filling lunch to bolster him up for the next tests. As they ate, Rupert let them know that Harry's tests were being graded as they speak, so he would have his results before they left. After they finished eating, they went back to the building, going to an area farther down the hallway than before. When they got to their destination, a witch and a wizard were waiting for them. Guys, this is Professor Khan and Sensei Tanaka. They will be the proctors for the Transfiguration and Defense tests, respectively. Proctors, this is Professor McGonagall, or Tonks, and Mr. Potter, Rupert introduced as they all shook hands. It is nice to meet you, Mr. Potter, Professor Khan said. I am eager to see how you perform today. As am I, Harry-san, Sensei Tanaka said. I can't wait either, Harry replied. The test will be in the same order as before, so whenever you're ready, you can get started. Tonks, Minerva, and I will be watching from the viewing room, Rupert said. He and Tonks wished Harry luck as they started to walk away. Minerva held Harry back for a moment. Good luck, and don't hold back. Harry nodded his head. I won't. With that, Harry followed the two proctors into the testing room. Sensei Tanaka sat to the side to wait her turn, while Professor Khan led Harry to the center of the room. There was a table there that held several objects and a few creatures on it. As I'm sure you can guess, we will be using these for some of the transfigurations you will need to do, Professor Khan began. For this test, I will simply ask you to do several types of transfigurations, and you will perform them to the best of your abilities. Sound good? Harry nodded in understanding, and Professor Khan began the test. As instructed, Harry was asked to perform many tasks progressing from simple to complicated. He gave it his all as he worked, being as creative as he could within the confines of the task's objectives. He used very little wand movements, able to do many of the transfigurations with a simple flick of his wand. Seeing how talented he was, Professor Khan gave him harder and harder tasks, trying to learn his limits. Harry had to use more wand movements for the more difficult spells, but he still performed admirably. The proctor was having fun watching someone with so much talent and went on for longer than the test stipulated. As they watched Harry move through the test, Rupert turned to Minerva in the viewing room, his eyebrow raised. Does he realize that what he's doing is complicated for some professors of the subject? Probably not, Minerva admitted. Back down in the testing room, Harry and Professor Khan were wrapping up. Is there any other relevant ability or talent you'd like to show me before we conclude? Professor Khan asked. Would you like to see my Animagus form? Harry asked in response. Once his proctor gave him the go-ahead, he took a deep breath before transforming, a fierce gray wolf taking his place after a few seconds. Harry shook himself before beginning to show what he was capable of in this form. First, he changed size, showing how big and small he could get. Then he ran around the room, displaying how much control he had over his movements as he leaped and twisted over and under obstacles Professor Khan placed in his way. Very impressive, Mr. Potter. There aren't too many natural Animagus around, Professor Khan exclaimed once they were finished. Thank you. I've only been an Animagus since the 30th of last month, but I try and work on it every day, Harry replied. I can tell. Do you have any other surprises? Harry glanced at the viewing window, his gaze on Minerva to ask a silent question. When she nodded in reply, he turned back to Professor Khan. Just 2 more. Then, without warning, Harry conjured a ball of flame in his hand and proceeded to manipulate it into various shapes to show his control over it. Just when his proctor was getting over his surprise, Harry did the same thing with air. He even made it visible so everyone could see it and finished off with a small tornado in the palm of his hand. That's everything now, Harry remarked when he was finished. Amazing, Mr. Potter. You seem to deserve all the fuss that's made about you, if not more, Professor Khan declared. Now you can take a 20-minute break before your next test. He turned to Sensei Tanaka, who had walked over to them. I hope you have as much fun during your turn as I just did. Sensei Tanaka glanced at Harry curiously. I'm sure I will. Back in the viewing room, Rupert was trying to get over the shocks Harry's performance had delivered to his system. Tonks and Minerva, however, were filled with pride, happy to see how far he'd come. His performance only confirmed their belief that he would be able to defeat Voldemort for good when the time came. He's something else, isn't he? Tonks noted when the man was silent for a few minutes. I can't believe he's only 16 and he's already that good, Rupert exclaimed. And a double elemental at that. Yes, though I expect you to keep that fact quiet until he decides to reveal it to the world, Minerva said, a hint of warning in her tone. Of course, Rupert agreed. Though it does make me wonder if you are as gifted as he is. After all, I'm already aware that you are a natural Animagus. Yes, fire and earth to be exact, Minerva replied after a bit of hesitation. He got the perfect mentor for him, Tonks remarked. Rupert nodded in agreement. Indeed, he did. Meanwhile, Harry was catching his breath and refocusing his mind for the next test. When his break was over, Harry and Sensei Tanaka went back into the testing room, while Professor Khan joined the others in the viewing room. The room configuration had changed from before. There were 3 targets set at increasing distances and a table with several strange stones on top of it. The rest of it was taken up by what looked like a large artificial battlefield, complete with trees, buildings, and other features you would find in the real world. Sensei Tanaka cleared her throat before speaking. To begin, I want you to cast every offensive spell you know at the targets I've set up. You will have to hit each of the 3 targets with all of your spells. I will be checking your power, accuracy, and speed of casting. Also, to make sure I know what spell you're using, you will say them aloud. Understood? Yes, Sensei, Harry replied. Good. You may begin when ready. Harry paused for a moment before beginning. It took him about 15 minutes to get through his spell list. Sensei Tanaka was impressed at the amount of power he was able to put into each of them, especially since he'd just used so much magic earlier. His accuracy and speed were high as well, though she expected nothing less from someone who trained under Minerva. She was well aware of the formidable witch's reputation. She tested his shields next, sending spells at him while he had to use the appropriate spell or tactic to defend against her. This went on for about 5 minutes before she stopped. Very good. Next, I will check your knowledge of counter spells, Sensei Tanaka said as they walked over to the table. Each of these 20 stones have a different dark curse upon them. You will have to identify the curse and cast the appropriate counter spell to disable it. You will only get 1 chance, so pick your spells wisely. I will be timing you, so you will start on my mark. Once he was signaled to start, Harry got to work. He scanned over each stone carefully, thinking it through before deciding on a counter spell to use. It took him another 15 minutes to finish, with only a few giving him a difficult time. Sensei Tanaka finished recording his scores before leading him over to the battlefield. To finish your test, you will have to duel me. The only rules are these: no unforgivables, no lethal intent, and no elements. Everything else goes. To make things even more interesting, you will have to travel through the battlefield to reach me first. I will be waiting for you in a courtyard in the middle of it. On your journey, it will add in its own surprises and tests, so be prepared for that. To give you a boost, you will be allowed to take this energy potion once you reach the courtyard, but not before then. Any questions? No. I'm ready when you are, Harry said excitedly. You go on the other end of the battlefield then. It will start as soon as you enter it. Harry walked over to his starting point, taking a deep breath, stretching his muscles, and making sure his occlumency shields were in place. Then he stepped inside, not even 5 steps in, and he already had to jump out of the way to avoid being blasted by an unknown spell heading for him. Then he saw a very realistic training dummy running toward him as more spells were thrown in his direction. He dodged out of the way of those as he returned fire. They dueled for about a minute longer until he was able to blow it up with a well-placed bombarda. He walked up to it and crouched down to examine it more closely. The dummy, unlike the ones at the Black Manor, was very human-like, with 2 legs and 2 arms that had a large range of movement. It even had a face and hair on its head. If Harry didn't know that he and Sensei Tanaka were the only ones in the room, he could have mistaken it for a real person. As he was examining it, the training dummy disappeared without warning, no trace of it left. Well, this is going to be fun, he thought as he stood up. Then he started moving forward again. He swiveled his head around constantly as he walked, staying aware of his surroundings now that he knew to be on guard for surprise attacks. He kept going until he reached a relatively tall building. He climbed up the ladder on its wall, wanting to get a better view of the battlefield. Up there, he could see quite a bit of the area, yet he couldn't spot Sensei Tanaka anywhere. The battlefield reminded him of the ones depicted in war movies, with barricades and defense posts scattered around among the buildings. Before he got down, he took note of the location of the large courtyard where he would meet up with Sensei Tanaka. Once back on the ground, Harry started moving forward again. His next surprise came as he was walking down a street lined with shops. As he passed by a seemingly empty coffee shop, he heard a cry for help. Confused, Harry stopped walking and turned his head to determine where the sound came from. His ears led him to look at the coffee shop. Cautiously, he walked inside of it. The front was empty, but the sound seemed to come from the back. He peeked in the small round window of a door that led to the kitchen and almost burst into the room at what he saw. There were 3 men standing over a little boy, their wands pointed menacingly at him. Harry could hear them taunting the boy for being a muggle, born wizard. It's just a simulation, and they're only highly realistic training dummies. So calm down, Harry, he said self-placatingly. Still, Harry knew this was another test for him to pass. So he took a deep breath to think clearly. He looked around the room he was in to see if there was another entrance into the kitchen, spotting one that would bring him in behind the men. He quietly made his way over there, easing the door open to avoid making any noises. Before he could take them out, though, one of them hit the little boy with a curse, causing him to double over in pain. Harry reacted quickly, pinning them all to the ceiling and summoning their wands from them. Then he knocked them unconscious as he knelt down by the boy's side. Like he did with the stones earlier, Harry scanned over him, trying to determine which curse was used. After about 2 minutes of analysis, he determined it was a rare Japanese organ decaying curse that slowly destroyed your organs from the inside out. Thankfully, he had learned about it, and its counterspell from a book Samina let him read, and he quickly applied it now. Once healed, the boy gave him a smile before disappearing, his attackers going with him. Shaking his head, Harry stood up and walked out of the coffee shop to continue the test. For the next hour, Harry made his way toward the courtyard, dealing with whatever obstacles crossed his path. He had to save a group of people from a building inflamed with cursed fire, though not fiend fire. He had to defend against another surprise attack with 2 opponents. He was ambushed by 2 acromantulas and 3 inferi, thankfully at separate times. He even had to ward off a group of 5 dementors, discovering that his Patronus had changed into a feline that looked suspiciously like Minerva's Animagus form, something he planned on examining closer when he had more time. Then he finally reached the courtyard to see Sensei Tanaka standing about 5 meters away from him. "Congratulations, Mr. Potter," she greeted as he came to a stop. "Now you only have to face me. I'll give you a 5-minute break, so take your potion and catch your breath. Then we will duel." Harry nodded before sitting down on a nearby chair. He gulped down his potion and calmed his mind. When the break ended, he got back up and stood across from Sensei Tanaka. They bowed to each other formally before beginning. Sensei Tanaka threw the first spell, a low-powered bombarda, to gauge his reaction time before the duel began in earnest. Their bodies moved fluidly as the duel progressed, neither gaining the upper hand at first as they learned each other's battle style. She was more of a tactical dueler, casting her spells accurately and efficiently, expending only as much energy as was necessary and no more. He, on the other hand, was unpredictable and used his environment to his advantage, Transfiguration playing a big part in his strategy. He was also accurate with his casting. No words were heard as they battled, but there was plenty of noise from the debris they threw around and the buildings their missed spells hit. 20 minutes into the duel, Harry started feeling the fatigue from his busy day, despite the potion he took. His casting slowed down a bit, and he was having a harder time trying to avoid Sensei Tanaka's spells. Knowing he needed to end the duel soon before he ran out of energy to fight, he tried to devise a plan that would help him win. He darted behind a large barrier for a moment to catch his breath, fortifying it with a quick spell so it wouldn't be destroyed easily. After a minute, he'd come up with something, though it was a bit risky. Well, it's not like she's going to kill me if it doesn't work, Harry reasoned. Resolve strengthened. Harry looked around for objects to use for his plan, locking onto 4 medium-sized stones in front of a building 10 meters away from him. Since it would require less energy to transfigure those, Harry decided to use them. He stood up and peeked around his barrier to find Sensei Tanaka. Then he sprinted from his position, dodging the spells she threw at him. He wasn't able to miss a cutting curse that hit his left arm, but he ignored the pain, focusing on his plan. Once at his destination, he released a thick smoke around him to obscure her vision as he executed his plan. He made one alteration to it, grabbing a smaller stone to carry with him. For a minute, nothing happened, arousing Sensei Tanaka's curiosity as she wondered what he was doing. Then, 5 gray wolves, identical to Harry's Animagus form, leaped from the smoke and raced towards her. She cast spells at them, but they leaped and twisted out of the way to avoid them. Harry's transfigurations were so good that it was impossible to tell which one was the real him without magic. She tried to hit them with the Animagus revealing spell, but they dodged her efforts. As they got closer, they became a bit easier to hit them, and she was able to stop 2 of them. Neither one was him, though. The remaining 3 kept coming toward her, spreading out to circle around her as she continued to try and get her. When he got his chance, Harry separated from the other 2, transfigured the stone he'd taken with him into another wolf. Then he transformed back into a wolf, shrinking down to the size of a pup. While she was distracted, he snuck up behind her, transforming back into a human when he was close enough. She spun around when she felt his presence, but it was too late. His wand was already in motion, and before she realized what was happening, he had her bound up with ropes, her wand in his left hand. Instead of being angry about it, Sensei Tanaka gave him a small smile. "Very good, Harry-san. Very good indeed." Harry bowed humbly. "Thank you, Sensei. You are a very formidable opponent, as are you. Now, if you would just untie me, we can go meet with the others." Harry did as was asked, and the 2 of them left the room. Those who had been in the viewing room were waiting outside in the hallway for them. "That was incredible to watch, Harry. Absolutely brilliant," Rupert gushed as he walked over to shake Harry's hand energetically. "Yes, you were truly a wonder to watch," Professor Khan agreed. "Thank you," Harry replied, feeling good about how he did as well. Minerva and Tonks were silent for the moment, though Harry could see their pride for him in their eyes. Once Rupert got over his excitement, he led the 3 visitors back to his office. Then Rupert the other proctors left to finish grading Harry's tests. "See, Harry, we told you there was nothing to worry about. You were bloody amazing in there," Tonks said. "We'll have to show everyone you're dueling the pensive when we get back." "I agree," Minerva said before turning to Harry. "I'm very proud of your performance in there." "I wouldn't have been able to do it if it weren't for your mentoring," Harry replied. "I only guided you. It was due to your hard work, focus, and dedication that you have reached this level of proficiency. Whatever results you get, you have more than earned them," Minerva countered gently. "I thank you," Harry said, realizing she was trying to get him to accept her compliment. "See, that wasn't so hard, Harry," Tonks teased lightly. They sat in the room for about 10 minutes longer before the proctors returned. "This sheet has the results of your tests for you to read over on your own," Rupert stated. but I'll go ahead and skip over that and just tell you how you did. With full consensus from all of us, we have decided to declare you a master of both defense against the dark arts and transfiguration. Harry's mouth dropped open as he didn't expect that. Tonks was practically bouncing around in her seat from excitement. Minerva wasn't surprised, though. She knew how much he deserved both masteries, having seen how much he'd grown over the past few years. He had already been talented when she started mentoring him, but now he was an incredible wizard with almost unmatched ability. You have far surpassed what is expected of someone at Newt level. Your knowledge of theory and application of that theory, mentally and physically, in both subjects is at a master level. Professor Khan explained, your ability to recognize a very obscure curse, known mainly in my homeland, was impressive and shows that you have studied the subject intensely. The fact that you were able to beat me, despite being fatigued, is outstanding and worthy of praise, Sensei Tanaka added. Therefore, we are proud to present you with masteries in both subjects. Congratulations, Harry. You deserve it, Rupert concluded, handing Harry 2 pins and an ID card that would show his achievements, as well as his score sheets. Harry was so overwhelmed that he barely managed to say thank you. He, Tonks, and Minerva left shortly after that, the latter two having to guide him as he was still in a daze. He didn't even notice Tonks send out a Patronus message as he was too wrapped up in his own thoughts. When they arrived back at the manor, they were greeted by a round of cheers with everyone shouting congratulations to Harry. He wasn't surprised by it this time, having expected them to celebrate his test results. Thank you, everyone, Harry said. I really appreciate all of your support. Then he made his rounds around the room, thanking each of them individually and accepting their compliments in return. The witches pulled him into warm hugs while the wizards shook his hand and patted him on the back. Then he was led into the kitchen where a veritable feast was spread out on the table, many of his favorite foods and desserts there. Everyone sat down at the table to celebrate, even the house elves. When the food was eaten, Harry was given a large box to open. What's all of this? Harry asked curiously, not having expected them to get him anything. It's just a few things to help you out now that you're going to be a professor. We all chipped in together to get them, Andromeda said. Harry opened up the box to find an assortment of things inside. There was a dark tan satchel with expanded pockets, picture frames with images of his parents, Sirius, and the whole group, a professional stationery set, tools for grading schoolwork, and a few other items to decorate his office and classroom with. Wow, thank you, he said. You're also going on a shopping trip for a new wardrobe, Hermione informed him. Ah, I am, Harry asked warily. Of course you are. After all, you have to get a new wardrobe for your professor look, Tonks exclaimed. She sounded a bit too excited to Harry. Good luck with that one, mate, Ron remarked, laughing under his breath with Neville and the twins. Even Charlie and Matthew felt bad for the wizard, knowing how women could get when it comes to shopping. Don't worry, Harry. We'll make sure you have fun, Ginny placated. And I won't let Tonks get carried away, Hermione promised. If you say so, Harry muttered. He still wasn't too hopeful about that, but realized he wasn't going to get out of it. Shortly after that, everyone either went home or to their rooms for bed. Harry was so tired that after taking a quick shower, he fell asleep seconds after his head hit the pillow. And I will not be adding anyone else to the hoods. There will be people who will help them, but not be part of the group. Also, I apologize to those who like Bill as a character. I do too, but for this story, he won't be the good guy. League of Hoods members: Harry, Alpha; Minerva, Lioness Hermione; Scholar Tonks Shifter; Andromeda, Barrister Amelia; Monarch; Hestia, Sleuth Fleur; Aphrodite Luna; Oracle; Ron Tactician; Neville Terran means Earth; Fred Thing 1; George Thing 2; Ginny Firecracker Charlie Bear; Samina Mystique Matthew Eagle; Arthur Humphrey means Calm Molly Matron. Chapter 15. And I just want to thank everyone for reading and or reviewing this story. Your comments and continued interest in this story is greatly appreciated. This will be another 2-chapter update. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 15. Andy, how do you think their occlumency shields are? Harry asked Andromeda after their morning training session, pulling her to the side. You want to be able to tell them everything about Voldemort and yourself before you leave for your trip, Andromeda guessed. Samina had told those in the know that she, Harry, and Minerva would be going to Greece to collect the unicorn blood on the 16th. That was on Friday of this week. Yeah, I don't want to go and not be able to tell them the truth if I can help it, Harry admitted. Andromeda thought on it for a moment. I think they're able to more than adequately protect their minds at this point. All of them have worked as hard as they could to get where they are now. Also, most of them are still in school and have at least 2 more weeks to practice before they will be around those who would try to invade their minds. Okay, I'll tell them after the meeting then, Harry decided. He was nervous about it, knowing that the truth would likely upset them, but it had to be done. At least Samina was working on a way to get it out of him, so it was less of the death sentence it had seemed like when he first found out about it. Tell who about what? Tonks asked, butting into the conversation. Telling everyone else about the Horcruxes, Harry clarified, his voice quiet to avoid being overheard. Oh, well, if Mum thinks they're ready to protect it, then you should, Tonks agreed. When are you planning on telling them? Today. After the meeting, since everyone will already be here waiting for us, Harry said. Good idea, though it'll be a bit of downer on our shopping trip this afternoon, Tonks remarked. Wait, what? Harry exclaimed, caught off guard. We told you about this last night, Harry. Keep up, Tonks said, dismissing his surprise. Andromeda could only shake her head at her daughter, knowing that she had not specified when the trip would be taking place. Anyway, I'll just have to work a bit harder to make sure you have a fun time. As Tonks started listing off all of the things Harry would need to get during their shopping trip, pacing across the floor, Harry groaned in exasperation. He muttered about witches going overboard as he walked off to get ready and dressed for the meeting, leaving Tonks still talking with only her mother left to listen to her. When she still didn't stop talking, Andromeda walked away as well. It took her a few more minutes to realize that she was alone. Wait, where did you guys go? 15 minutes before 9, Harry, Minerva, Andromeda, Samina, Hestia, and Matthew arrived at the Ministry of Magic to meet with the Hogwarts Board of Governors. All of their evidence was prepared and ready to go, with each prospective professor having a resume to prove their capabilities. Amelia and Hestia met them in front of the meeting room a few minutes later. They had left the manor earlier to take care of a few things for work. The area they were in was secluded, so they didn't have to worry about anyone seeing them there, and they could talk freely. So, they let you go after all, Harry joked. More like she kicked everyone out of her office saying, and I quote, I'd advise you all to leave before I decide there's a need for employee restructuring. The whole lot cleared the room quick after that, Hestia explained, a satisfied smirk on her face. Go boss, Tonks cheered, while Harry laughed as his mind conjured up images of what the expressions on their faces would have looked like. They should have gotten out when I said it nicely, Amelia remarked unrepentantly. Well, that's one way to clear a room, Andromeda noted. Indeed, Minerva said, amusement clear in her voice. Then she focused them back on their upcoming meeting. Now, does everyone have everything you need? They all checked over their things one more time before nodding their affirmation. Good. Remember to wait for the signal before you come in. The plan was for Minerva, Amelia, and Hestia, as Amelia's bodyguard, would go into the room first while the others waited outside. Once Minerva had received the governor's oath that the details of the meeting would be kept secret until the first official day of school at Hogwarts, she sent a Patronus to let them know it was time to come in. Don't worry, we'll be ready, Harry said, speaking for all of them. Let us start this meeting then, Minerva said as she moved to knock on the door. When she heard a verbal response, she pushed open the doors and walked in. Amelia was beside her with Hestia behind them both. All 12 of the governors were present, sitting on a raised dais arranged in a semicircle around the room. In the middle of the room, on the ground level, was a podium on a slightly raised platform. There was no other seating provided. The governors hadn't expected anyone besides Minerva to come, so they hadn't felt the need for them. That is why they were so surprised to see the minister walk in with Minerva. The 3 witches didn't pay them any mind, though as they strode up to the podium, Minerva expanding it so she and Amelia could stand behind it together comfortably. Once everyone was situated, Minerva began the meeting. Good morning, and thank you for agreeing to meet with me today. I assure you that I'm here to discuss a matter of extreme importance. You're welcome, Professor McGonagall, though I'm sure I speak for everyone else when I say we're caught off guard. Minister Bones, I was not aware you would be attending this meeting, Governor Kent, the head of the board, replied. We are sorry for the lack of prior warning of my attendance, but the circumstances of this meeting require an element of secrecy. Auror Jones is here as my protection detail, though I'm sure you can understand that due to my change in status, Amelia stated. What do you mean? Another governor asked in confusion. Before we get into the reason for this meeting, There is something I must ask from all of you, Minerva said cautiously. Because of the huge nature of the subject and its need to be kept a secret until the right time, I require all of you to take an oath that you won't reveal the contents of this meeting or anyone who attends it until the welcoming feast at Hogwarts. Nothing we discuss here can be discussed at all. In fact, no mention of this meeting can be made to anyone until the time Professor McGonagall has specified, Amelia clarified. A few governors balked at the suggestion, but most had calculating expression on their faces. I believe we should assent to their requests. Neither Minister Bones nor Professor McGonagall are known for playing games. If they say the subject is serious, then we need to hear them out, Governor Greengrass declared, getting nods of appreciation from the two witches. Governor Kent called for a vote on the matter to make it fair. After a bit of hesitation from some, they decided to do as Governor Greengrass suggested, with only 3 protesting the issue. Once they had taken the oath provided for them, Governor Kent turned back to his guests. Now that we have satisfied your requests, will you tell us what this matter is about? Of course. But first, there are a few more people who need to join us, Minerva said as she sent a Patronus message to Harry. A few seconds later, the rest of the group walked into the room. The look on the governor's faces was full of shock and nervousness, especially due to Harry's presence. All except for one. Governor Greengrass sat back with a small smirk on his face, knowing that things had just gotten even more interesting. Harry casually flicked his wand at the podium, enlarging it to fit the rest of the group. We have come before you today to discuss Headmaster Dumbledore's position, Minerva began once the rest of the hoods were in place. Professor McGonagall brought this matter to my attention a few weeks ago. After careful consideration, I agree with her assessment of him. He is no longer fit to be the headmaster of the school and hasn't been for several years, Amelia stated. How could you say that? This is Dumbledore we're talking about, and he has done an excellent job in that position for several years, one governor protested. The hoods took note of said governor in case he considered going against his oath. We have evidence that proves he has failed to adequately protect the lives of the students over the past 5 years. His hiring practices are also questionable and have affected the quality of education the students have been receiving, Minerva declared. Please explain your evidence to us, Governor Kent said before any of the other governors could voice their opinion. Minerva cleared her throat before beginning. In 1991, he allowed Professor Quirrell to teach defense, knowing that he was being possessed by Voldemort. He hid the Sorcerer's Stone in the castle, knowing Voldemort was after it with the intent to use it to come back to power. In 1992, he hired Lockhart as the defense professor, even though he was horribly underqualified for the position. Then he refused to close down the school or allow the Aurors to patrol it during the Chamber of Secrets event, despite the danger the students were in and those who had already been petrified. In 1993, he let the former minister force the Dementors to patrol the school, causing the students unnecessary trauma, all of which was pointless seeing as Sirius Black had managed to sneak past them in a locked prison. There was little hope that they would be able to locate him in a large castle surrounded by acres of open land. In 1994, he failed to adequately protect an underage student from being forced to participate in the Triwizard tournament. Even after that, he still didn't add any extra security or protection for the event, allowing that same student to be kidnapped from school grounds. It must also be mentioned that he was either unable to detect that his friend, Alastor Moody, was being impersonated by Barty Crouch Jr., or that he did nothing to stop him from carrying out his plan. Finally, during this past school year, he failed to find a proper teacher for defense and allowed Madame Umbridge to hold that position despite her being highly unqualified. Then he stood by as she abused her power and even tortured students who she saw as inferior to her with the use of a blood quill. All of the accusations caught most of the governors off guard, but it was the last one that had Governor Greengrass standing up in righteous fury. Do you have proof that she used a blood quill on the students? Harry stepped forward to show him his hand, where the scar still remained from his time with Umbridge. I was her favorite target, but not the only one. If it weren't for the help of Hogwarts' house elves, it would have been much worse. Minister Bones, are you planning on charging that woman for her atrocities? Lord Greengrass demanded. I will be attending to that matter very shortly, Amelia promised. In fact, she had ordered the woman to meet with her today. Trying to regain control over the meeting, Governor Kent spoke up. These charges are very serious. Before we start making any decisions, Is there any other evidence you have against Dumbledore? Amelia wrapped up the argument Minerva had been making. There is one more questionable hire to discuss. In 1981, he hired Severus Snape as the potions professor. While the wizard is good at making potions, he does not have the temperament to teach any class. Over the years, several students have made complaints about the man's lack of actual teaching, favoritism to Slytherin students, and cruelty to all other students. That's not even including the fact that Snape was a Death Eater who only got off on Dumbledore's word. Despite all of this, Dumbledore has protected him to the detriment of the students, and because of that, Snape has single-handedly decreased the number of qualified potion makers, healers, and aurors we have in this country. After pausing for a second, Amelia glanced at Harry. Speaking once, she had received his nod of consent. We also have proof that Dumbledore should never again be in charge of the welfare of any child. As Lord Black's magical guardian, he has failed to perform even the basic duties that position requires. Dumbledore allowed Lord Black to be systematically abused mentally, emotionally, and physically by the family of his mother's sister. Not once did Dumbledore check in on him to ensure his safety and well-being, or even attempt to prepare him for his life in our world. In fact, Lord Black knew nothing about his parents or his heritage until he received his letter from Hogwarts. Dumbledore even lied to Professor McGonagall whenever she asked after Lord Black's welfare, claiming he was safe and happy when the reality was the exact opposite. When Lord Black brought his abuse to Dumbledore's attention at the end of his first year at Hogwarts, the man ignored it and continued to send him back there every summer. He didn't even try to talk to Lord Black's relatives or curb their abuse at all. These actions prove that Dumbledore is not only unfit to be headmaster of Hogwarts, but shouldn't be around children or in charge of their care at all. Minerva passed out the physical evidence they had brought with them to the governors as Amelia spoke. When Amelia was finished, they started reading over it. After about 10 minutes, Governor Kent looked up at his guests. "I am appalled by what you have revealed to us. While we knew there have been some incidents at Hogwarts in recent history, Dumbledore has always downplayed the severity of them. However, school is set to start in 20 days, and I'm not sure we would be able to fill all of the positions necessary before then. If we were to go down this path, school would have to be delayed." Governor Greengrass spoke up, a knowing glint in his eyes. "I believe that problem has already been solved for us. Professor McGonagall is the obvious choice for headmistress. She has proven her worth several times over as the Transfiguration Professor, head of Gryffindor House, and the deputy headmistress. I think it would be hard to find many who could contest her record. If it weren't for her, I'm sure the school would have fallen into ruin. Also, I'm sure that the rest of our guests aren't here just as backup." "Thank you. And you are correct, Governor Greengrass," Minerva admitted. "Knowing that this proposal would cause many positions to open up, I and Minister Bones thought it prudent to find qualified candidates to fill them." Amelia began to introduce everyone, giving their name and chosen position while Minerva handed out their resumes. "If you make Minerva the headmistress, then Professor Flitwick would be a good choice for her deputy. For History of Magic, we chose Andromeda Tonks. It's time Professor Binns retires permanently. For Potions and the head of Slytherin House, we chose Samina Easton. Snape definitely needs to go. For Transfiguration and the head of Gryffindor House, we chose Matthew Copeland." Amelia paused for a moment, making one governor believe she was done. "I thought you were prepared, but you seem to be missing one position, the defense professor," the governor interrupted smugly. "I was just getting to that," Amelia rebuked, glaring pointedly at the governor. He could only look at her for a few seconds before backing down. "Now for the last candidate, I need all of you to keep an open mind. After much consideration, we believe Lord Black is best suited for the position of defense professor. He is a mere child. How could he possibly teach anyone when he hasn't even finished school himself?" the same governor argued. Before anyone else could voice their protests, Minerva cut them all off. Her stern tone silenced them all. "Lord Black is more than capable of teaching the students. He has come face to face with dark witches, wizards, and creatures and come out alive every time. He has survived and persevered in situations where many of you likely would have given up, and he has already proven himself to be an excellent teacher. Under his tutelage, all of the students who were part of the group known as the Defense Association were able to